take a slow breath. In and out. We are walking into the old Atlantic world. The year is leaning toward darkness. Fields look tired. The air smells like wet grass and wood smoke. You can hear sheep somewhere off to the side, arguing politely about nothing. We are here to meet the roots of Halloween. We are here to meet a night that was not a brand, it was a hinge where the year turned. People measured time with work and weather, not with apps. The bright half of the year had light and growing things. The dark half had long nights and careful plans. The turn between halves called people together. They had to count food and fix tools. They also had to face the feeling that the world was about to get serious. You do not joke with winter, not unless you have a good fire and better neighbours. Samhain was the word many used. Say it like sew in. It marked the end of the bright half. It welcomed the start of the dark half. It was a new year for many, a reset that arrived with frost on the grass and a sudden love for thick cloaks. It was also a time when the boundary between the living and the dead felt thin. People said the world was busy on that night. Not empty. Busy. Villagers gathered on hills and commons. They built bonfires that could be seen from far away. Fire does many jobs at once. It warms, it protects, it gathers the distracted into a circle. It also looks good on a cold night. If you have ever stared into flames until your thoughts slowed down, then you understand. The fire was practical and sacred at the same time. No committee meeting was needed to approve that. Old embers in houses were sometimes allowed to die. New embers were carried back from the shared blaze. That act made each hearth part of one thing. Many fires. One source. It is hard not to feel safer when the heart of your house came from the same light as your neighbours. It is also a neat way to guarantee everyone shows up to the party. Animals had their own part in the season. Herds came down from summer grazing. Fences were checked. Stalls were cleaned. People sometimes led cattle between two small fires. Call it blessing, call it cleansing, call it a good excuse to write buyers into the schedule with a warm glow. The cows probably did not enjoy the heat on their ankles, but they loved the gossip. Food storage was not a side plot, it was the main story. Grains were counted, apples were sorted, meat was salted and hung. If you could eat it in March, it mattered in October. People made lists before lists were fashionable. A winter could decide if your planning was wise or wishful. The mood of Samhain carried that truth. Celebrate, yes, but also be ready. The night carried rules of its own. They were not written, everyone knew them. If you felt a draught, you did not slam a door. If you walked a lane and the wind felt watchful, you said hello in a soft voice. If a stranger asked for bread or drink, you shared what you could. Some visitors might be living, some might be not. Better to be kind and assume you just served someone's grandmother who had excellent timing. People left bits of food at doorways and windowsills. A crust, a sip, a plate's worth for eyes you could not see. It was not about calories, it was about respect. It said we remember you, it said we know that we are part of a long story. It also said, please do not tip over the milk or make the dog bark all night. Nobody wants that. Disguise had a practical side. If the world is busy and some of the traffic is not human, you do not flaunt your face, you mask, you paint, you throw on a ragged cloak. The goal is to become a question. A nobody is harder to bother than a somebody. Also, if you are a teenager, dressing up is fun. That part of human nature is older than any calendar. Groups wandered with songs or jokes. They might knock and ask for a small gift. Not candy yet, a bit of bread, a hot drink, something to prove the house was generous. In return, a blessing was offered, or a rhyme. or a promise to pray for a loved doe who had passed on. You can call it a moral economy if you want to sound clever. Most people just called it being decent on a thin night. Mischief existed too. Gates walked across fields, wheels appeared on rooftops, turnips mysteriously learned to sit on fence posts and stare. The line between prank and problem was policed by neighbours and by tomorrow. If you broke something today, you had to face the owner in daylight. Halloween worked because the community had a memory. You could not hide behind a username. Divination played a quiet role by the fire. Apple peels were cut into one long ribbon and tossed over a shoulder. If it made a letter on the floor, people joked that this letter was the initial of a future love. Nuts were thrown into the coals to see which would burn together. People listened for footsteps on empty roads. These were small games. They were also a way to sit with the unknown and not panic. There were stories. Of course there were stories. The kind that say, do not leave the straight road for a shorter path through a bog. The kind that say, do not mock the wind. The kind that say, if you hear your name called in a voice that sounds like a cousin who moved away years ago, you should keep walking. Many of these rules were safety, with folklore seasoning. Honest advice wrapped in a tale. Hospitality was not optional, it was insurance. If the dead passed by, you wanted them to remember your house as warm, not stinges. If the living passed by, you wanted them to come back when your roof needed a hand. A bite of bread can make enemies into neighbours. That is true on any night. It is extra true on a night when the world is paying attention. You might ask if they called it Halloween. Not yet. That name would arrive later with church calendars and language shifts. But the bones of the night were here, a hinge in the year, a meeting between living and dead, fire against dark, jokes against fear, work wrapped in ritual so it felt like celebration instead of stress, with snacks. There was also the sense of a clock with more than hours. People felt the weight of past and future. The hand you hold today once held a different hand. The child you soothe today might one day carry you to the fire. The night made these thoughts easier to say out loud. It is simple to forget that time is a circle when the sun is high. It is hard to forget when the fields are asleep. The air had its own chorus. Dogs huffed in their sleep. A kettle clicked at the edge of a boil. Somewhere a fiddle tried to be cheerful and barely managed it. Laughter rose and fell like sparks from the fire. A few arguments happened, because humans. Then someone passed around a hot drink and the argument took a nap. People believed things because the land taught them. If you are careless with a candle, a thatch roof will end the lesson quickly. If you leave a gate open, sheep will explain the consequences with their feet. If you ignore your elders, winter will bring their advice back at a louder volume. In a world like that, a respectful nod to the dead is simply good manners. The night could feel long. Children blinked heavy eyes and made promises to stay awake that nobody believed. Grandparents told the same story again, and nobody minded. The punchline landed exactly as it always did. Familiar laughter makes a better blanket than wool. Light has a way of making truth easier. A face looks kinder across a fire. An apology comes faster. A plan seems possible. If the dark half of the year was an exam, then this was the study group. Nobody had all the answer. Everybody had what answer. Share what you have. That was enough. As midnight neared, a hush sometimes grew without anyone ordering it. The fire went from rowdy to steady. People listened to the wind as if it had an announcement. Perhaps it did. Perhaps it only wanted to be wind. Either way, the listening felt right. You could call it prayer if you like. You could call it common sense. On the edges of the gathering, there were small tasks. Someone checked the embers that would go home. Someone made sure the youngest had warm hands. Someone counted the tools for the third time because anxiety, does not respect the calendar. These chores look humble. They are the spine of survival. The idea that the dead could walk was not meant to terrify, it was meant to comfort. If love does not end, then the people you miss are not gone. They are simply busy on another path. A night when paths cross is a gift. You treat it with care, you set a cup, you say a name, you let the air carry your answer. People like to picture the past as dramatic. Capes and solemn oaths and wolves howling on cue. Sometimes yes, mostly no. Mostly it was people who were tired and kind, people who wanted enough to eat and a roof that did not leak, and friends who would help move a heavy cart without complaining. When the year turned, they did what worked. They lit the dark, they fed the living, they honoured the dead. There was room for humour. It does not ruin reverence, it keeps it real. A joke about a cow with opinions can live beside a blessing for a grandmother. Laughter is a ladder. It helps you climb out of tight thoughts. It does not cancel grief. It gives grief a gentle chair. As the blaze dropped to coals, people broke away in twos and threes. You can hear the long quiet now. Boots on frost. The little clink of a metal pan. Whispered promises to meet in the morning and fix the fence that decided to be creative. The embers ride home in earthen pots. A glow held close to the chest. It looks like each person is carrying a small red heart. In a way they are. Doors closed up by wine. Hearths woke back up with a soft rush. Shadows climbed the walls and then settled down. Someone tucked an extra blanket on a sleeping child. Someone sat at the table and ate the piece of bread that had been set out. Not because the dead forgot it, because the living needed it. Sharing can be a circle you complete on behalf of a guest who has already moved on. The last task was the same in many houses. A small prayer or a small promise. Watch over us. Help us through the dark. We will do our part. We will work. We will be fair. We will keep the fire fed. We will make the jokes softer than the fears. That is a good trade. If you want to label this night, you can. You can call it a festival, you can call it a rite, you can call it a community tune-up. All true. You can also call it a practical embrace of the season ahead, a way to face the long road with full hands instead of empty bravado. Now picture the sky just before sleep. Stars are hard bright points. Clouds move like slow ships. The land is quiet in a way that makes your shoulders drop. You lived another bright half. You have arrived at the door of the dark half. You are not alone at the threshold. The house glows. The neighbours glow. The hills remember your fire. That is the heart of the origin. Start together, carry light home, treat the unseen with respect. Hold a little humour near the front of your mouth, in case fear tries to sit there. Make plans that include your worst day, not just your best one. That is how you arrive in spring with stories and with everyone you can bring along. Before you sleep, hear on more sound, the soft crack of a log shifting in the hearth. It is the most ordinary magic there is. Wood, air, flame, care. It is enough. It has always been enough. Let it be enough tonight. Picture the map of the islands in the North Atlantic. Now picture a very determined set of Romans pointing at that map and saying yes. That. Load the ships. Pack the sandals. Bring the paperwork. Empire loves paperwork. Rome did not arrive with a soft knock. It arrived with legions, forts, roads, and a company policy that said, "Congratulations, you live in a province now." Some locals fought hard, some bargained, some shrugged and kept herding, because sheep do not care who the governor is. Over time, the borders settled. A wall even carved a line across the north to say, "Please do not raid us, we are tired." It was a request, not a guarantee. With empire came new rhythms, markets changed, taxes had a schedule, roads cut across old paths like fresh scars. The calendar had a new heartbeat. Latin words drifted into daily speech. Baths opened. The bathhouse was the gym, the cafe, the rumour mill, and the place where you realised you forgot your towel again. Religion did not stay in lane either. Rome was good at borrowing. If a local hill had a god on it, the Romans met that god and said, "Nice hill, maybe it is also the home of one of ours." Temples grew in places that had been sacred for so long that no one remembered why, only that they were. Shrines were shared by old and new names. Prayer is bilingual when it needs to be. The Roman year carried its own feast days. Some honoured the dead. Parentalia ran for days in February, when families visited tombs and offered simple food. Feralia came near the end of that stretch, a bare and honest day to remember the passing. There was also Charistia, a family day to be grateful for the living. Different month, same heartbeat. Love runs both directions on the calendar. Other festivals honoured harvest, fruit, and fertility. Pomona was the name of a goddess of gardens and trees. Apples, nuts, and the gentle rust of orchards belonged to her. You can almost smell the sweet storage rooms where fruit waited out winter. People do love a crisp apple when the wind cuts. Now imagine the overlap between a Celtic year that turned at the edge of autumn and a Roman system that respected fruit and also respected the dead, just at a different season. You can see how customs would rub shoulders. A soldier marries a local sells apples at a Roman-style market. Upstairs, kids try games with fruit because fruit is round, tricky and delicious. That is how cultural fusion often happens. One kitchen, two traditions, a shared table. Let us walk through an autumn evening in a small town where the empire has been around long enough to be annoying but useful. The fields are stubble. The air carries that cold metal smell of coming frost. The forum has stalls that would look familiar in Italy. The hills still hold the old fires when the right night comes. People carry two kinds of time in their pockets: the imperial list and the local song. Apple games fit the season. Some say that bobbing for apples can be linked to the love of Pomona and to courtship games that made their way into autumn fun. The logic is simple. A bowl of water, apples that float, teeth only, laughing is required, dignity is optional. You either catch chatch or you do not. If you do, everyone cheers too loudly, because cheering keeps you warm. If it seems silly, that is the point. Silly lets people rest from heavy news, war news, tax news, winter news. The bowl became a stage for bravery on a safe scale. A daring head plunge beats a reckless raid. Everyone goes home damp and pleased. Nuts came next. Nuts in the fire crack and jump. You can assign meanings to the way they move. If two roast together, call it a blessing for a pair. If they pop apart, call it a warning. The fire gets a show. The room gets an easy way to talk about love and luck without making anyone blush. There were also tricks with apples and mirrors. Peel a fruit in long strip. Toss it over a shoulder. If it makes a shape that looks like a letter, pretend your future true love has a name that starts with that letter. Everyone knows it is wishful play. That is the point. The wish matters more than the letter. So when did these pieces begin to feel like the later holiday? Slowly, note by decree, note by a single moment. The new layers sat on top of the old ones because they fit. Autumn is harvest. Harvest is fruit. Fruit is games and gifts. Autumn is also death and return, because fields sleep and wake. The living think of the dead when the land goes quiet. You can feel the echo without anyone teaching you a rule. Some Romans no doubt raised an eyebrow at hilltop fires and whispered tales of the other world. Some locals no doubt raised an eyebrow at togas in the rain. Eyebrows can be raised, and lives can still blend. People still need to chop wood, fix roofs and calm fussy babies. Shared chores build shared jokes. Shared jokes build a bridge wider than official policy. Trade helped too. Apples moved from orchard pockets to market tables. Honey travelled, wine travelled. Ideas travel with food because food gets invited into houses. An orchard keeper might swap pruning tips with a neighbour who knows the old songs for that hill where the fog sits. By the end of a decade, nobody remembers who swapped which tip first. They just know the apples keep better in straw, and the songs sound good when the work is done. The empire sent administrators who loved a ceremony. Locals watched, learned, and edited. Sometimes a Roman-style procession borrowed a local tune. Sometimes a local fire rite borrowed a Roman-style sprinkle of wine. If anyone complained, the wind carried the complaint off, like chaff. The field did not care who got credit. The field cared that the work happened on time. You can imagine a household that keeps 2 calendars on the same wall. One marks contracts, tax days, and market fairs. The other marks when to drive the herds down, when to stack peat, when to greet the long night with a blaze and a blessing. The 2 calendars do not fight. They nod at each other, like neighbours who share a fence and a dislike of storms. Did everyone love the mix? Of course not. Some priests and magistrates felt fussy about purity. Some elders grumbled that young people spent too much time on games and not enough on the stack of wood that needs splitting. This is universal. Every century has the same dialogue. Young people play, old people warn. Winter decides which side had a point. Often both did. The thing about empire is that it leaves tools behind. Roads, words, habits. After a while, the tools feel local. A lane paved by soldiers becomes the path to the orchard. A Latin word becomes the word your grandmother uses when she tells you not to run in the house. A bath becomes the place where you learn the news about whose pigs broke a fence. Another thing about empire is that it ends. Borders shrink, troops leave, paperwork slows, but the blended customs have already learned to walk on their own. Autumn still arrives. People still stand in that thin place between abundance and worry. They reach for what has worked. Fire, food, company, memory, jokes that keep the cold from settling into the spine. So, did the Romans invent Halloween? No. Did they contribute parts that stuck? Likely. Apples and nuts settle into the season like old friends. Playful games slide in beside solemn thoughts and make the night human scale. A borrowed goddess of fruit does not cancel a local sense that the veil is thin, she just brings dessert. There is a practical edge under all this sweetness. Fruit stores well, nuts keep for months. If you plan an autumn gathering where people bring what lasts, you have a party that does double duty as a pantry check. Nothing goes to waste. The bowl of apples used for games will be eaten tomorrow. The nuts that popped will be cracked and shared with a laugh. The leftover bread will find a pocket on the way home. A Roman officer on duty at a small post might walk the night watch and hear singing in a language he will never quite catch. He knows enough to leave it alone. He also knows enough to buy apples at the market early the next morning because they sold out last night. That is cultural exchange, measured in breakfast. A local child might learn to write a few letters at the edge of a Roman school and use that skill to mark storage jars. Barley, oats, apples, nuts. The letters will be Latin, the food will be local, the winter will be easier because the labels saved time when the light was thin. This is how the world improves in tiny, unheroic ways. And through it all, the stories evolve. Spirits learn new routes to wander. Heroes take on a Roman name in one version and a hill name in another. The orchard girl who laughs at the water bowl becomes the clever wife in the winter tale. The soldier who respects the fire becomes a ghost who minds the road and keeps travellers safe if they greet him politely. Folklore updates itself like a patient scribe. You can also watch language change. A word for a feast shifts, a word for a blessing takes on a local colour. Even the way people count the days around the turning of autumn can slide. The mood remains, the details get a costume. Nobody notices the costume change after a while, they only notice that the lines still fit the scene. It is fashionable to imagine cultural blending as chaos. Sometimes it is gentle, a song picked up by a neighbour, a game borrowed because it made Auntie laugh until she could not stand up straight. A fruit placed on a doorstep because someone remembered that last year a stranger helped pull a cart from the mud and should be thanked in the language of snacks. Let us return to that bowl of water. The room is warm. Breath makes small clouds when the door opens. The apple skins shine in the lamplight. A cousin goes first, fails with a splash and grins anyway. The next person leans in, bites clean, and holds up the prize to the roar of a family that is proud of very small things for very good reasons. This is the sound of a ritual that works. It brings the room together. It costs almost nothing. It sends everyone to bed, softer around the edges. Outside, the fields know nothing of empires. They know frost and thaw. They know the hands that plant and the hands that pull. If apples helped people carry the season with more cheer, the fields nod and carry on. If a Roman road helped a wagon get home before the sky went black, the fields nod and carry on. Practical blessings deserve a quiet nod. We can be honest about the empire and still keep the cosy truth. Rome brought iron discipline and irritating taxes. It also brought sturdy bridges and a habit of writing things down. Local life brought stubborn joy and a willingness to make any imported habit earn its keep. Between them grew an autumn set of games and treats that felt both new and ancient. When you look at modern Halloween, you can see the faint outline of that blend. A harvest of sweets, a carnival of small dares, a house that signals welcome with light, a night that lets you speak of the dead without breaking. Even if the details are different now, the old engine still hums. If you listen close, you can hear two languages in the laughter. The Roman counts the coins for the fair, the local counts the sheep coming down from the hill. Together they count the number of people who showed up, who ate, who sang, who will meet again when the nights are long. That is the number that matters. When the bowl is empty and the nuts are gone, someone tells a tale about Pomona, the lady of fruit who smiled on the orchard that year. Someone else tells a tale about the hill fire that burned too bright and had to be tamed with wet rushes. The two tales sit side by side like old friends. No argument, just two ways to say the same thing. We made it through another turn, we shared what we had, we remembered who we are. The last person to leave the room takes the bowl to the shelf and sets it upside down so it dries by morning. They look back at the hearth. The coals are lazy and red. Tomorrow will be work again. Today had play in it. That balance feels right. That balance is why people bother with festivals at all. Step out into the lane. The stars are cold and sharp. Somewhere a Roman milestone stands like a quiet sentinel. Somewhere a hedgerow that has been there since before the legions arrived stands like a different kind of sentinel. Between them moves a person with an apple in each pocket, and a grin they do not need to explain. That is history at ground level. Not a debate, a good walk home. time to watch a rebrand happen. Not a small one, a whole season gets new names, new meanings, and a very official calendar slot. The church arrives with candles, bishops, and the kind of confidence that says we have a plan for your spooky hinge of the year. Please hold while we update the signage. First, the basics. In the early medieval centuries, Christian leaders built a year that told a story. Fast days, feast days, days to remember heroes of the faith. Those heroes were called saints. People loved saints because they were like local legends who returned phone calls. If you prayed to a saint, you hoped for help that felt close to home. There was already a day to honour all the saints together. At first it lived in spring on some calendars. Later, a move happened. In the 700s, a pope in Rome dedicated a chapel for all saints and placed the celebration on November 1. In the 800s, the celebration spread wider across the West. The result was a neat fit where a Christian feast called All Saints' Day, or All Hallows, landed right after the old autumn hinge. The timing was not random. It was strategy with a smile. Words changed with the calendar. The night before All Hallows was called All Hallows' Eve. Say that quickly for a few centuries and you get Halloween. That is the rename at the heart of the modern label. The old night did not vanish. It put on church clothes and learned some new lines. What did All Saints mean in daily life? Churches held masses with bright candles and confident hymns. People gave thanks for known saints and for countless unknown ones. Not every hero has a statue. The feast said they still matter. You could feel the pastoral logic in that. A field worker and a queen both count in a heavenly head count. Right after All Saints came All Souls on November 2. This day was for the faithful dead who were not officially saints. In other words, for your people, your parents, your neighbours, the good baker who always cut the last loaf in half so 2 customers could leave happy. All Souls said please remember everyone, not just the famous. The mood shifted from triumphant to tender. From the living could help. That belief turned memory into action. Bells were rung to call people to pray. Monks read long lists of names. Families gave bread, coins or firewood to the poor and asked that their loved ones be remembered at the altar. This was not a spooky transaction. It was communal care stretched across the border of death. Enter the custom of soul cakes, small round breads, sometimes sweet, sometimes marked with a cross. The idea was plain. Give a cake, ask for a prayer. Both parties win. A hungry belly gets fed. A grieving home gains comfort. Children and the poor would go door to door and receive cakes in return for saying a prayer for the household dead. Add a lantern for the road. Add a scrap of costume for warmth or courage. You can see the lines of trick or treat start to sketch themselves. This was called souling in many places. Skulking. Souling. People carried a song as their calling card. The lyrics changed by town and century, but the chorus was steady. A blessing in exchange for a bite. If you are hearing echoes of older door-to-door customs, you should. Medieval life layered, it did not erase. Churches had their own soundscape. On the eve and the feast days, the slow toll of bells marked the hours. Some towns rang a passing bell for the departed, and a soul bell for all souls. Bell ropes were a civic tool as much as a sacred wad. They told time, they signalled fires, they knit a neighbourhood with sound. If you wanted a sleepy vibe, you walked by the church at dusk and let the low notes drape over your shoulders like a heavy cloak. The rebrand did not throw out fires on hills. In some regions the community bonfire continued, with a new blessing spoken at the start. A priest might show up and sprinkle holy water. Then the old practical work would resume. New embers carried home. Hearths relit. Nobody complained that the flame looked too Christian or not Christian enough. Warmth solved that debate. Masks and mischief did not vanish either, though sermons tried to keep them tidy. The logic was familiar. If a night feels thin, a disguise feels smart. So people wore old veils and rough costumes and moved through lanes in groups. Meanwhile, the church tried to aim the energy toward prayer and charity. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes someone put a cart on a shed roof. Human nature survived the policy memo. Divination games persisted in corners. The clergy frowned on them in many places, but frowns do not stop apple peels from landing like letters. A compromise often formed without anyone saying it out loud. Keep the sacred parts in the day, and the playful parts by the hearth. Keep your promises to pray. Keep your pranks mostly reversible. Tomorrow, you still have to look your neighbour in the eye. Medieval markets also leaned into the season. Bakers sold special breads. Candle makers did brisk trade. Peddlers hawked tin charms and ribbons. If you wanted to connect your household to the feast, you could put a new candle in the window and a clean cloth on the table. You could sweep the floor and call it theology. Tidying as devotion is a concept with 9 lives. Language adapted to the new frame. People started saying on Hallowtide, meaning the span around All Hallows and All Souls. The whole cluster became a season of memory. Families walked to churchyards with simple offerings, a sprig of evergreen, a ring of bread, a prayer said with chapped hands. Medieval art shows souls pictured as small figures lifted toward light by angels. The message was not complicated. We are held. This is where the sarcasm can safely tiptoe in. Did every medieval person sit quietly and behave like a stained glass window? Not a chance. Plenty of squabbles broke out over who borrowed whose cloak and failed to return it on time. Plenty of youth tried on being bold and discovered that boldness looks a lot like helping stack wood when an old neighbour sighs at the pile. Festivals have always been a training ground for being human around other humans. Liturgies gave the days structure. The vigil on the eve, the Mass for All Saints, the offices for All Souls with psalms that roll like deep water. Repetition did its calm work. If you had a grief that made language stumble, the prayers held the words for you. If you had no grief that week, the prayers reminded you that someone near you did. Community works best when it admits that pain is always in the room, even when it is quiet. There were also guilds and confraternities, lay people who organized themselves to do good works, sing in processions, and keep lamps burning. They adopted the season with enthusiasm. A guild might sponsor candles for the poor, a group of bell ringers might keep an overnight watch and toll at set intervals. An alms box by the church door would grow heavy and empty again. Systems of care do not need apps to function. They need habits and neighbours. Souling songs deserve another look. In many versions, the singers bless the house and ask for a reward, then promise to pray for the souls of the household. The tone is cheerful, even cheeky. A little cake, a little ale, God bless the master and the mistress and all the little souls within. You can see why this survived. It is a graceful exchange masquerading as a party. Not every place used cakes. Some gave soul bread, soul mass bread, or soul buns spiced and stamped. Recipes varied by region and purse. The point remained, you cannot pray on an empty stomach for very long. Feed the body, then the mouth can form the words, then the heart can mean them. Practical piety is the kind that gets repeated. The poor were not scenery in this season, they were participants. The calendar gave them rightful claims. They could knock and receive without shame, because the knock was part of the script. This mattered. Medieval charity could be harsh on ordinary days. On Hallowtide it could be almost warm. The line at the door was not a failure. It was the festival doing what it promised. The church also leaned into teaching. Sermons reminded people that life is short and love should be long. Preachers loved a good image. Leaves fall, so do we. A candle burns down, so do our days. So do not waste your time on bitterness. Make peace while the coals are bright. The village veteran of many winters could have preached the same sermon with fewer words and more finger-pointing. Stack your wood, pay your debts, be decent. The theology and the chores agreed for once. You might wonder how much fear coloured the days. Some, yes. The idea of judgment sat close by, but the dominant mood around All Hallows and All Souls was steady remembrance, not panic. The iconography is full of lighted windows, lines of people with candles, and saints who look like competent aunties and uncles. Comfort did not mean denial, it meant company. In towns, you would likely see processions, crosses held high, banners, singing that even the tone-deaf could follow because the melody was forgiving. People followed with small lights and softer voices. The walk went to the church, through the churchyard, and back along lanes where the living and the dead felt like neighbours separated by a fence you could lean on. Afterward, houses warmed up again, a pot simmered, a heel of cheese made the rounds. Someone told a saint story with the same relish used for a good ghost yarn. Saints were not all solemn. Some were bold, some were funny, some were stubborn. People told the biographies the way families tell stories about the relative who once did something ridiculous, and also kind. Meanwhile, the secular authorities tried to keep a lid on rowdiness. Some towns issued orders against wild pranks, against cross-dressing on holy nights, against fires set in the wrong places. The orders existed because people broke them. The pattern is eternal. A festival invites joy. Joy sometimes forgets to read the rules. The mourning asks for brooms and apologies. If you step back, you can see the new frame hold the old shape. The year still turns, the dead are still near in memory, the living still need warmth. Only now the nights come wrapped in names that point to a larger story. That does not erase local flavours, it just invites them to the big table. The result is a culture that can hum two tunes at once without losing the beat. There is a quieter layer too, private grief. A mother tying a ribbon on a bench in the church where her son used to sit. A man stopping at a mound that no one visits but him. These moments did not make it into guild minutes or royal proclamations. They shaped the season anyway. The calendar gave permission to feel. A permission slip for sorrow is a serious kindness. What about the famous folklore of ghosts and goblins? Did not vanish, it adapted. The goblin at the lane became a restless soul who needed prayers. The wild hunt skimming the clouds became a warning to get indoors and light a candle for safety and for the departed. The church did not invent the weather, it offered a way to talk through it. In the kitchen, change tasted good, new spices entered from trade, solar cakes took on nutmeg in one town and honey in another. Children compared which house gave the best buns, which house gave coins instead, and which house tried to hand out boiled turnips again, a crime for which history will never grant a full pardon. By the end of the Middle Ages the pattern was firm. Hallow Eve with lamps and visits, All Saints with bright services, All Souls with bell notes and lists of names and quiet lanes lined with candles guttering in early wind. If you squint, you can see the modern holiday inside it. Costumes turned up, treats moved from bread to sweets over later centuries. The line from prayer for souls to please give us something nice is not as long as it looks. It is a human line. Feed, bless, remember, laugh, repeat. Let us end with a small house on a small street. The door stands open to the damp air. A dish of round cakes waits on the table. The family sits with their cups. They talk about the year, who left, who arrived, who changed. They take a cake to the neighbour who has no family left. They bring back for their own. The exchange needs no treaty to explain it. The season taught them the habit. The habit does the rest. So yes, the church rebranded a wild hinge into a holy tide, but the tide kept much of its old shoreline. Fires still burned, neighbours still knocked, jokes still lived underneath the solemn bits like friendly mice in the thatch. The biggest change was the caption under the picture. From thin night to hallowed nights, from nameless ancestors to all saints and all souls, language can move a lot of meaning with a small shove. You can sleep on that thought. Names change, needs remain. Food, flame, company, memory. Keep those alive and any calendar can carry you through the dark. That was the medieval promise. It is still a decent plan. You asked the big question, did they celebrate Halloween in the medieval period? The short answer is yes, but they did not always call it Halloween, and they did not file a permit with a pumpkin logo on it. The longer answer is more interesting. The nights around the turn of autumn were busy with visits, prayers, food, disguises, bells, and a kind of neighbourhood contract that said be kind now or enjoy a season of side-eye later. That is a celebration by any sensible definition, even if the word had not settled yet. Picture a village lane after harvest. Mud is trying out new personalities. The sun checks out early. Windows glow. Somewhere a bell counts the hour like a slow heartbeat. People are moving between houses with baskets, lanterns, and the look of folks who intend to do small errands that accidentally last all evening. If you are waiting for a marching band, you will be disappointed. If you are waiting for proof of a festival, here it is in soft focus. The church calendar gave the frame. Hallow Eve was the night before All Saints. All Saints was a bright feast. All Souls followed with sober kindness. Around this cluster grew local habits that were half devotion and half neighbourly routine. You might stop at a door to offer a blessing and receive a round cake. You might carry a list of names to the priest for the memorial. You might help an old neighbour set a candle in the window so her husband, gone these 5 winters, would not be forgotten. You might also make 3 jokes in poor taste and pretend to look ashamed when your aunt catches you. Disguises did not vanish with the new names. The same logic held. A thin night invites cover. So coats turned inside out, faces got a smear of soot, hats went on at strange angles, and a scarf did double duty as both warmth and anonymity. People moved in 2s and 3s. A group could sing. A group could carry a lantern safer. A group could politely ignore the suspicious cart that somehow migrated onto a shed roof after dark. Best not to notice, for now. This was also the age of mumming. That meant door-to-door performance with quick costumes, stock characters, and bold delivery. Imagine a living room that becomes a stage in the time it takes to kick the cat off the bench. A hero strides in, a fool trips in, a doctor appears with a comically useless cure for everything, and somebody dies dramatically and then springs back to life so the audience can relax. The play is not Shakespeare. It is cheer up, the nights are long. And it works. Mumming varied by region, but the core was the same. You perform. The house gives a reward. Coin, crust, ale, a slice of something sweet. A blessing is exchanged. Laughter arrives right on time. If a child forgets a line, the fool covers with a quip about cold toes, and the room approves. Nobody is grading the acting. They are grading the warmth, and the warmth gets an A. Souling felt different from mumming, but could overlap. Where mumming was theatre, souling was prayer with pastry. Children, the poor, and sometimes organised groups went door to door and asked for soul cakes in return for praying for the dead of that household. The words were clear. A cake for a prayer, a blessing for a bite. You could call it a spiritual economy, or you could call it everyone looking after everyone in the only currency that makes sense when nights are long. Food and remembrance. A soul cake was small and round. It could be sweet with spice or plain as daylight. Sometimes it wore a cross. Sometimes it wore a simple stamp from the cook's favourite cup. If you think this sounds like a cookie with paperwork, you are not wrong. But the paperwork tasted good and filled a corner of the stomach that grief leaves empty. The bell towers contributed their own soundtrack. On the eve and the days that followed, bells tolled to mark the hours of prayer for the departed. In some places, the ringing went through the night. That was not spooky. That was concierge-level service for the soul. The deep notes rolled over fields and hedges and let everyone feel connected, even the houses too far to see each other's windows. Churchyards were visited with calm strides. Not every grave had a stone. Many had only memory. People stood, named their dead, and set a light where it would be seen by no one except the heart. If you need a single picture of medieval Halloween under other names, take that one. Lanterns guttering in a lane, breath white in the air, a whispered thank you to the past, then home for stew, bread, and the kind of silence that does not hurt. Meanwhile, pranks existed with a seasonal permission slip. Gates were lifted from hinges and leaned neatly against a wall to prove that mischief had manners. A barrow might be found exactly atop the well cover, for reasons known only to the architect of chaos. The worst culprits were corrected in daylight. The best pranks earned a grin and a promise to repay in kind next year. The rule was simple. Be funny, not cruel. Be clever, not costly. You still need these neighbours tomorrow. Some towns tried to regulate the wild edges. Proclamations scolded against masks in church, against rowdy processions after dark, against banging on doors like creditors. The fact that rulers had to say these things tells you that the nights were lively. The fact that they had to repeat themselves tells you that the nights stayed lively anyway. Policy is strong. Tradition is stronger when it has snacks. Fire kept its place. In some regions there were still communal bonfires. Elsewhere, families burned smaller heaps in yards or at crossroads. Crossroads had meaning. They were places between places. If you wanted to speak to the dark politely, you did it where paths met. People carried embers home to relight hearths. A year does not restart properly without a red coal in a safe pot and a neighbour walking beside you to help if you stumble. Safety first, then symbolism. Turnips and beets were pressed into service as lanterns. Yes, pumpkins will arrive later like charismatic guest stars. For now, the root vegetables did their best. They were hollowed with stubborn knives. Faces were simple, mostly because cold fingers have no patience for fine art. A candle went in. The result was small, lumpy, and a lot more terrifying than anyone expected. Perfect. Divination survived in the corners where grandmothers do their best work. A peel tossed over the shoulder to make a letter on the floor. A pair of nuts in the coals to see if two people will burn together or pop apart. A whisper in a mirror in a room lit by a candle, followed by rapid regret and the decision to drink something warm in a well-lit kitchen instead. Play and worry make good companions when kept on a short leash. In some places the guilds and fraternities organised processions that combined charity with pageantry. Imagine a line of people with candles, sturdy shoes, and a donor who paid for the wax so nobody had to choose between light and dinner. They walk the lanes, they stop at the sick, they leave a loaf at a widow's door, they ring the church bell once at each corner. It is not glamorous. It is excellent. Markets responded to the season because markets are smart. Bakers sold buns and cakes that belonged only to these days. Candle makers sold small tapers for windows and big ones for altars. Cloth sellers moved warm hoods to the front of the stall. because business sense is seasonal. If you wanted to feel the turn of the year in your hands, you could do it with a fresh loaf, a coil of wick, and a wool scarf that did not smell like last year's sheep yet. Not every region matched every custom, but the rhyme stayed. In Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, across places later called the Low Countries, across parts of the continent, you find the same November energy. Memory, fire, food, doors that open to strangers and close to the wind. The exact recipe changed by parish and purse. The taste was the same. What about fear? It showed up, but not as the main character. People respected the idea that spirits were near. They respected the idea that choices mattered beyond the grave. Then they handled the respect the way practical people do, by doing the chores, by feeding those who asked, by ringing bells at set hours. If you want a terror tale, you can find it. If you want a template for kindness, you can find 10. Clothing signalled the season, even when Noah said costume. A simple hood pulled low, a shawl that made any face anonymous at 10 paces, a mask cut from leather or wood, saved from last year, softened by handling, ready again. Children wore whatever made them brave, adults wore whatever made them warm. Courage and wool are the true pairing. Stories flowed between thresholds, a whispered account of a light seen over the marsh that did not belong to any lantern, a warning about the lane where giggles never sound like children, a boast about how a simple prayer quieted a noisy attic, followed by a quiet admission that someone also nailed the shutter that night just to be thorough. Faith and carpentry can be friends. There was a courteous habit to give the road to the unseen. If the night wind felt pushy, you stepped aside. If you heard footsteps behind you and then ahead of you with no time in between, you nodded to the air and kept walking. These gestures cost nothing and made the hair on your arms behave. Peace of mind is a reasonable goal for a festival. In many towns the watch kept an eye on things, not to end the evening, to keep it inside the lines. A constable might guide a rowdy group away from the mill pond. A beadle might gently encourage a too loud chorus to choose a new street. The best officers understood that the season needed room to breathe. The worst tried to suffocate it, and then wondered why the next year was noisier. Inside houses the same plot played out across 1,000 kitchens. A pot hung from a hook and muttered to itself. Bread cooled under a cloth. Someone told the biggest child to mind the smallest child, and both took this command personally. Someone polished the family lantern because it was going to have a night out and should look respectable. Someone counted the cakes, decided there were enough, and then baked 2 more just in case. If you want numbers, you will be disappointed. Medieval people did not survey themselves after Hallow Eve to rate their satisfaction on a scale 1 to 10. They measured success in quieter ways. Was the bell rung? Were the names spoken? Did the poor go home fed? Did the neighbour forgive last month's fence incident? Did the wind pass by without rattling the shutter too hard? If yes, call it a good Europe. Not every moment glowed. There were arguments. There were drunks who took the license of the night too far. There were sermons about it the next week. There were apologies with bread as punctuation. There was the slow work of remembering why the festival exists. Not to break the village, to keep it from breaking under winter. A small note about words. People did not wake up and say, "It is Halloween" with a crisp H. They said Hallow Eve. They said Hallowtide. They said the season of All Saints and All Souls. They also said we are going out after the candles are lit, which is how most names sound in real life. Over time the shortcut version stuck. That is how language behaves when it is tired and hungry and late for a procession. Craft passed through these nights like a quiet current. Wood carvers made better lantern faces each year without admitting they practiced. Cooks refine spice blends by pretending to measure and secretly relying on memory. Bell ringers learned the pull that made a tone that sat in the chest like a hand. Children learned the route that felt lucky and the step that kept feet dry at the ford. Useful knowledge disguised as tradition. What about fear of witchcraft? Later centuries will get excited about that. In the medieval period, the dominant script leans toward prayer, charity, and careful fun. Suspicion existed, but most people understood the difference between a neighbour with herbs and a story told to scare children into coming home on time. The festival worked best when judgment stayed small and hospitality stayed large. Toward midnight the lanes thinned. Lights drew closer to doorways. Bells slowed. A last group of singers walked by, voices ragged but happy, with a dog that joined at the third house and never left. The wind tried the shutters and gave ebb. Inside, a plate was left on the table for latecomers, named or nameless. That custom alone could carry a village through 3 storms, and a rumour, then sleep, the kind that hits after fresh air, food, and the relief of doing what you promised. In the morning, smoke rose straight up from chimneys, and people nodded to each other with the easy pride of a job done on time. The festival was not over. All Saints still shone, All Souls still asked. But the hinge had turned, and it had not creaked just... So did they celebrate Halloween in the medieval times? Yes, under church names and in village clothes, with bells and bread, with disguises and lanterns, with prayers that felt like letters sent across a narrow river, with pranks that remembered tomorrow, with the practical truth that a community that eats and sings together stands a better chance against cold and worry. If you listen to a modern October night, you can still hear the old pattern. Knock and answer. Light and share. Remember and laugh. The costumes shine brighter now. The treats come wrapped. The songs are shorter. The engine underneath is the same. Feed body and soul. Keep fear small. Keep neighbours close. Walk the lane together, and the lane will walk you back. We have crossed the threshold into the early modern world. Printing presses chatter, preachers thunder, queens and kings swap policies like hats on a windy day. Through it all, the autumn nights keep their appointment. The season does not care what the court is arguing about. It wants bonfires, bold jokes, and a little costume work that toes the line between holy and hilarious. This is the age when play acting grows teeth and a tail, not the dangerous kind, the comic kind. The village fool puts on a red cap with horns and declares himself the devil for the night. Do not panic. This devil is a prop for laughter and a warning to behave. He is a walking exclamation point. He also trips on thresholds and blames the floor, which ruins his brand in the best way. Masks get more inventive. Old veils, soot-stained faces, a set of wooden teeth carved for the sheer drama of it. Cross-dressing turns up because nothing scrambles a dull street like a tall man in his auntie's shawl pretending to be a gossip with a voice like a cracked bell. The trick is not rebellion for its own sake. The trick is relief. For a few hours the usual labels take a nap. The town looks at itself from a slant and laughs. Mummers keep knocking. Their scripts pick up new bits. A dragon tail made of sacking. A paper crown that has survived 6 winters and 7 repairs. The swaggering hero who always wins but needs 5 tries. The quack doctor with a box of miracle cures for colds, heartbreak and missing chickens. He offers a dose of turnip syrup for everything. It cures nothing. It cures the room anyway. Out on the lanes, hobby horses dance. Imagine a wooden horse head on a pole, with a cloth body that hides a dancer who refuses to tire. The horse nips playfully at onlookers. People squeal and give a coin for the feed bag. The horse bows to babies and terrifies geese. which is fair since geese have been terrifying humans for centuries and deserve a taste of their own medicine. Not every preacher approves. Some sermons thunder against masks, against devils as jokes, against anything that looks like the world getting ideas above its station. The thing about thunder is that it rolls away. People listen, nod, and then adjust the night a little rather than abandon it. No bonfire in the graveyard, fine. Bonfire by the mill. No horned hats inside the porch, fine. Horned hats in the lane. Compromise is a village superpower. In the same years you will hear of witch trials in some regions. This chapter keeps the tone gentle, but we cannot pretend that fear never bit. The stage devil worked because it was clearly play. The real fear of witchcraft was a different script, and it hurt people. Many communities pushed back by keeping the festival kind, by directing tension into comedy and charity. It is hard to whip up a panic when the fool is juggling and the guild is handing out bread. Door-to-door customs continue to braid together. Souling is still strong in many towns, with cakes traded for prayers. Mumming rides beside it with theatre traded for treats. New verses appear in the songs to suit new politics or new bakers. Everyone knows which house gives the good buns, and which house needs a cheerful knock because grief lives there this year. The map is drawn by memory, and it changes with kindness. Inside kitchens, the calendar tastes like nutmeg. Trade has carried spices farther. A soul bun that was plain in a grandmother's youth may carry a soft heat now. The cook will say she follows no recipe, and then measure with a care that would shame a chancery clerk. Children learn to roll little rounds and stamp a sign on top. It is devotion in dough. It is also a clever way to keep small hands busy while the big hands mind the fire. Games multiply. Snap-apple now hangs fruit from a string instead of floating it in a bowl, which is either progress or a new way to look silly. Faces aim. Teeth miss. Everyone cheers anyway because enthusiasm is warmer than accuracy. Kales are pulled from the garden in some regions, the length and dirtiness of the stalks supposed to say something about future loves. There is a lot of laughing at roots with opinions. There is talk of dumb suppers in a few places. A quiet meal set with spare chairs and no speech, meant to invite a glimpse of someone you miss in the corner of your eye. The rules vary by parish and daring. Sometimes a mirror is involved. Someone always giggles from nerves and the spell breaks into relieved chatter. The point was not to see a ghost. The point was to admit the ache and handle it gently. Bonfires stay central. Parish charters sometimes bless them with tidy language. Keep the blaze modest. Keep the lanes clear. Keep the children on this side of the rope. The rope is borrowed from the mill and tied with more knots than a ship. Sparks go up, the crowd goes quiet, then loud again, when someone tells a cracker of a joke about the reeve who fell asleep in the stocks last year. The reeve laughs too. He has heard it 100 times. Tradition is repetition with fondness. Turnip lanterns do their stern duty. A few villages experiment with larger gourds when they can get them from gardens that like to show off. The carving is blunt and bold. Eyes, a mouth, a grin that looks like it was designed by a committee of crows. The lantern is set at the door to signal 2 messages at once. Welcome to the living, behave to the wandering. If you want a smarter security system, you will have to invent electricity first. The devil as a character keeps popping up beyond the mummers. Maskers trade a simple horned cap from house to house. One person plays the tempter, another plays the clever maid who always outwits him with a line sharper than a scythe. These bits are less theology than folk common sense. Pride loses, greed trips. Wit and kindness win the pie. The audience gets the moral without feeling lectured, which is a rare and useful trick. Parish authorities try something new. They sponsor official revels to channel the night. A steward hands out small coins to players who keep order. A beadle walks with a lantern at the edge of the crowd like a friendly comet. A list of rules is read from the church porch. No breaking fences, no throwing stones at windows, no stealing the miller's goat even as a joke. The miller clutches the goat like a baby and everyone agrees this is sensible. You will be. The Reformation changes the soundtrack in many places. Saints' days get trimmed, processions shrink or vanish, but memory does not evaporate on command. All Hallows Eve keeps a footprint under other names. People still step out with lights. They still name the dead near the hearth. They still pass cakes and coins, even if the official reason gets edited. Habits shake. They do not dissolve. In Scotland and parts of the north, the word guising settles as the term for going out masked. Children and youths recite jokes or songs in exchange for treats. The exchange expects performance. No trick by default, but a little trick if you try to take without giving. It is a tidy economy. Do a turn, earn a bun. Do 2 turns, earn 2 buns and a story about you that will follow you for a year. In Ireland, the night grows a reputation for merry pranks that remain just this side of trouble. Gates go missing and reappear exactly where someone needs them tomorrow, which is a lesson about logistics, disguised as mischief. Old men swear a certain lane belongs to fair folk after dark, and should be walked with a respectful nod. Young men pretend not to nod, and then nod anyway when no one can see them. Printed pamphlets and broadsides spread jokes and rhymes. A few moralists clutch their caps. They warn that masks will lead to doom by Thursday. Thursday arrives with mild hangovers and a lot of sweeping. Doom does not show. The next year the pamphlet prints again, because pamphlets also like tradition. Plays pick up seasonal scenes. A travelling company gives a comic devil a bigger speech and the audience delights in booing him. The actor bows deeper. He knows he just made the village feel united for 10 minutes. Booing the same villain is the cheapest social glue on earth. Next week he will play a saint with equal conviction. The point is the togetherness, not the costume. Household altars shrink or expand depending on theology and purse, but candles at windows stay popular because candles are both beautiful and useful. A small light in the dark says, "Come in, the kettle is on." It also says, "Keep walking, you who mean harm. Signal and shield at once, no manifesto required." A flame can write sentences more clearly than ink. Guilds adapt again. If the parish does not want a procession, the guild will do a charity round instead. They repair a widow's fence. They deliver fuel to a weaver whose hands have gone stiff. They collect coins in a wooden box with a slot that squeaks like a mouse. By the end of the evening the box is heavy. By morning it is lighter, and 10 households feel less alone. Divination keeps evolving. A ring hidden in a cake makes a brief appearance, and a lifelong argument about choking hazards. A set of cups turned upside down hides symbols that tell fortunes in a way that is deliberately vague so nobody fights. A mirror sits on a table and reflects exactly what is in the room, which is to say friends, crumbs, and the light. Everyone decides this is a good omen. Music earns its keep. Fiddles try to keep warm by moving fast. Drums kick a heartbeat into muddy lanes. Voices stack in simple harmonies that even reluctant singers can handle. A slow air insists on being heard between the fast ones. The room falls still for 3 minutes. The bravest person wipes a tear without fuss. Then a jig rescues the mood on schedule. Clothes for the night are not costumes in the modern sense, so much as exaggerations. A taller hat, a longer sash, a scarf worn like a cape. Soot makes cheekbones look alarming. Flour makes a face ghost pale. A strip of linen becomes a bandage for the hero who always dies and always rises when the doctor promises a patent medicine that sounds suspiciously like warm ale. The devil character is helpful again. He lets a community talk about danger without pointing at a neighbour. He breaks in, uninvited, preens, fails, and flees. The laugh at his exit is relief. It is rehearsal too. The next time a real temptation knocks, maybe the memory of how easy the villain looked will make a difference. Humour can be a boundary in disguise. Roads knit villagers together more tightly. A few bold troops walk to the next parish for bigger takings. They return with gossip, new lines, and a tune that everyone pretends to hate until they cannot stop humming it. A shared song moves faster than any decree. It also ignores borders like a cat ignores rules. Weather continues to run the show. If the wind howls, people move the fun inside. If the stars burn cold and the air is still, the lanes bloom with lanterns and the sound of boots. Mud is a regular character, never billed, always present. Everyone learns which cleaner works best on lane soup. Everyone agrees that the poor should get first crack at the good coals when the fire is banked. A few literate souls keep diaries. They write lines like "much laughing this Hallow even," and "cake given," and a jest of the devil that made even the vicar smile, and no harm done. These notes are not headlines. They are the way history really accumulates. Small testimony that a night did its job. In some towns, Hallow and the 5th of November sit close enough to borrow each other's kindle. Bonfire culture doubles up. One night leans pious, one night leans political. People carry skill from one to the other. They also carry the memory that fire is a tool that must be watched. The best fire captain is an old woman with a bucket and a voice that gets attention. Stories about will-o'-the-wisp keep pace. People say a tricky light dances over marshes to tease the unwary off the road. The counterspell is simple. Do not chase what does not want you. Walk home steady. If you cannot tell which path is yours, wait for someone with a lantern who knows the ground. That is good life advice wearing a ghost hat. Meanwhile, children perfect the art of gentle menace. A rhyme that ends with a hint of a prank if no cake appears. A promise to bless the house twice as hard if the good buns are fetched from the back. Adults pretend to negotiate and then hand over 2 buns with a sigh that fools no one. The transaction is really about joy. The pastries are a symbolic paperwork that proves the season went through the proper channels. We should mention safety. The early modern festival is a machine built by practice. The lanes get swept in the afternoon. The water buckets are filled before dusk. The oldest neighbour watches the little ones when the crowd thickens. The beadle knows where the troublemakers stand and walks the long way around to intercept them. Prevention is the secret choreography of the night. And yes, sometimes things go wrong. A prank runs cruel, a drunk stumbles, a sermon next Sunday grows an extra paragraph. Confession and repair are part of the cycle. The festival is not a spell that banishes trouble. It is a habit that makes repair easier by keeping people in the same room with the same song on their lips. By the late part of the era, printed almanacs list Hallowtide with brisk notes. A day for remembrance, a night for watchfulness. Customs diverse. Beware of idle persons roaming after dark. Bring in your turnips at Michaelmas. The almanac always circles back to turnips. The almanac knows who feeds the winter. Take Gay Ordinary House near the end of this period. The door is open to the damp. A lantern sits like a small moon on a stool. From the kitchen comes the sound of a spoon knocking the side of a pot and the smell of onions trying to be sweet. On the table sits a plate of buns, already shortwhile because the cook must test quality for the safety of the parish. She reports that standards are high this year. Players arrive, They stamp the mud off their shoes and bow like princes who know they are wearing patched sleeves. The host nods and makes room. The hero forgets a line and points his sword at a shelf full of jars as if they are the enemy, and the room roars. The doctor prescribes a dose of laughter and a slice of cake. The devil arrives late, looks around, and decides this household is too friendly to bother. He trips on the ankle of a chair anyway and earns a cheer. After the players leave, neighbours slip in. A widow sits by the fire and holds a cup in both hands like it is a letter from a far country. Someone mentions her husband by name. Everyone nods. It is a small ceremony without a book. It matters as much as any procession. The light honours the living and the dead in none glow. Later, a small group heads to the churchyard with lanterns. They do not stay long. They do not try to feel grand. They stand under a sky that looks like cold iron dotted with pinholes. They say names. They breathe. They go home. The lane holds their footsteps and their quiet talk. The world is big and busy. It makes room for this foot. At last the night thins. Candles gutter. Laughter fades to the shape of a smile that will still be there in the morning. Someone carries the feed bucket out to check that the goat did not decide to be an escape artist. Someone saves 2 buns for the beadle, who pretends not to like sweets and always fails at pretending. Someone draws a mark in a ledger that only lives in the head. Hallow kept, neighbours fed, mischief balanced, memory tended. This is early modern Halloween by any reasonable measure. The name still drifts. The rules still flex, the spirit stands firm. Put on a face that is not your face. Let the devil lose. Honour the dead with bread and fire. Hold your friends close enough to laugh and close enough to help. Leave a candle where the road can see it. Expect to sweep in the morning. Call it a fair price for joy. Tonight is about fire and faces, about why people light the dark, and why they carve grins into vegetables as if the garden grew comedians. It is also about a hiring decision. Turnips held the job first, pumpkins took it later. We will be fair to both candidates. We will also admit that knives and cold fingers affected the vote. Start with the obvious question, why so many bonfires? Because fire works, it warms hands, it scares off the worst of worry. It gives a village a centre. You can hear the music of it before you see it. A deep, steady rush, like the sea pretending to be a choir. People step into the circle and feel the night step back a little. No magic trick, just physics with good manners. Fire is also a signal. From a ridge you can see another blaze on the next hill. That tells you 2 things. Your neighbours are they, and your neighbours are fine. Human beings sleep better when they can see proof of other human beings doing the same smart thing at the same time. This is the entire business model of festivals. Blaze size varied. In some places the pile was neat and official, a carefully stacked tower fed by dry wood and watched by someone bossy with a bucket. In other places the fire looked like a dragon built by committee. It roared. It sulked. It smoked. It still did the job. Perfect is the enemy of warm. People liked to bless the blaze. Old words, new words, church words, field words, anything that named the light as friend. Then came the practical moves. A ring of bare earth to keep sparks honest. A rope to remind children that gravity has opinions. A watch set to walk the perimeter with a lantern, and that face that says, "I see you," thinking up mischief, please stop thinking. At some fires the crowd led cattle between 2 smaller flames. The animals thought this was a strange hallway that smelled like ambition. People called it protection. It felt like a promise. You and I are going into winter together. I will guard you. you will feed us. Everyone nodded at this deal as if they had invented it 15 minutes ago. Ashes had a quiet afterlife. In the morning a farmer might scatter a pinch on a field, call it a blessing, call it fertilizer, call it both. A few saved a coal in a safe pot and carried it home to relight the hearth. The gesture said, "Our little fire is part of the big." That is the point of community in Nut's sentence. Divination loved the edge of the blaze. Nuts gave a show. Throw 2 on the coals and watch. If they jumped apart with rude little pops, people laughed and said some pairs are like that. If they burned side by side, someone blushed and everyone pretended not to notice. Later the nuts were eaten, because snacks are not optional. Apple work liked the kitchen better, but it drifted to the fire when the air bit harder. A peel cut in and long strand became a letter on the ground if luck cooperated and knife skills held. Usually it became a shape that looked like a confused question mark. People declared it an S or an L, or a love that would someday learn to spell itself. Now the faces. Lanterns by the door did double duty. They helped late arrivals find the step. They told the other world to use indoor voices. A simple candle in a simple cup was standard, but many places wanted something with character, something that looked backed. Enter the turnip. Hardy, abundant, thick-skinned, unimpressed by drama. In the old country, the turnip or the beet was carved into a lantern with a little face because people have always been unable to resist putting faces on things. A small knife did its best. 2 triangles for eyes if the carver was feeling modern, 2 hollows and a slice if the carver was cold and in a hurry. The mouth was a line that accidentally became a snarl. The result was a lumpy guardian with a grudge. Turnip lanterns were not cute. They were terrifying in the way that a potato wearing a scowl is terrifying. You look at one and felt judged by a vegetable. This pleased everyone. The whole point was to make the night think twice before it played rough at your threshold. A carved turnip radiates the energy of a bouncer who has seen it all. The work was stubborn. Anyone who has hollowed a turnip with a pocket knife at the edge of a November wind deserves a medal. The smell was something you remember forever, but the light through those thin carved walls came out sharp and mean. Perfect for the message, we are home. We are friendly. We are also not in the mood. Stories grew around those faces. Some told of a stingy man who tricked the devil and was stuck roaming with only a coal in a carved route to guide him. Some told of Will or the wisp lights that played tag on bogs and needed to be mocked by a lamp that looked crazier than they did. The details changed. The idea stayed. Carry your own light. Make it confident. Make it weird. Neighbours competed. Who could carve the most alarming frown? Who could get the candle to stay lit through a gust that wanted to be famous? Tips were traded. Scrape thinner here for better glow. Do not cut the lid all the way off or the wind will steal it. Save the bits for the pot. Nothing goes to waste except dignity when your lantern rolls off the step and chases your dog. Faces were not the only shapes. Some cut symbols, a cross, a spiral, a circle with spokes like a little sun for luck. Some households skipped carving and set a simple lamp because the memories on the mantel were heavy, and flashing teeth felt wrong this year. The rule of the night was flexible. Do what brings you through. Fire had indoor forms. Hearths were swept and built up special. The first flame after the big fire carried a kind of quiet ceremony. Someone told the youngest to light it. Someone told the eldest. Every house had a tradition that claimed to be original and probably was, which is how tradition works in real life. Plenty of people set lights for the dead, a candle in a window, a lamp on a sill, a small lantern at the road bend where a cousin slipped o' winter, and never quite walked the same. Light calls names without sound. It also keeps people from hitting their neon furniture, which is a holy act in its own way. What did people not do? They did not store fireworks in the thatch. They did not leave bonfires alone like toddlers. They did not carve by the fire while wearing sleeves the size of sails, unless they were in the mood to meet the beadle and apologize. The night worked because the village did the prep and the cleanup, as if they were parts of the rite. They were. Now the big orange elephant in the room. Pumpkins. How did they get the job? Geography and convenience arranged the interview. When people from the old islands crossed to North America, they carried their October habits with them. Fire, faces, door-to-door fun, a preference for light that looks handmade. The land met them with vines covered in pumpkins, saying, "Hello, we are large, hollow, and cooperative." The negotiations were short. A pumpkin is carving friendly. The walls are thick but not stubborn. The seeds come out in one spirited handful, followed by a second handful, followed by a 5-minute break to say whose idea was this, and then it is done. A knife moves through pumpkin flesh like a good gossip through a quiet room. The result glows steady and bright. The smell is cheerful. The scale is generous. The face can be subtle or loud. Pumpkins asked for the job with a firm handshake. Turnips did not retire immediately. They lingered in places where pumpkins were rare or expensive. Families with stubborn pride kept at the old ways because the old ways had carried them. But even stubborn cooks have wrists. Word spread. This new gourd is easier on the hands. It also gives you a lantern you can see from the lane without squinting. One by yarn, the knives switched teams. Pumpkins also matched the look of autumn in the new land. Fields turned the same colour. Leaves copied the shade. Markets piled them like orange moons. Children could carry small ones like trophies. Grown-ups could carry big ones like arguments. A carved pumpkin on a porch said we joined the neighbourhood. A whole row of them said, "We are." Faces softened with pumpkins. The grim turnip scowl could now become a grin with teeth like a piano if you had time and patience. Triangles for eyes arrived with a vengeance. Stars too. In time, artistry went wild, but the early years favoured simple cuts and big light because candles were small and nights were big. The message stayed. Welcome. Behave. Wipe your feet. Share your snacks. Where did the pumpkin lore come from? Some old stories hitched a ride in new clothes. The roaming trickster with his ember now held a lantern big enough to see. The bog lights became porch lights. The will-o'-the-wisp had competition, and did not like it, which is a story someone definitely told to a child who wanted dough more tail before bed and got 5. Pumpkin seeds turned into a bonus. Roast them, salt them, brag about your method, argue about whether they should be chewy or crisp. Every house insisted that last year they found the perfect roast, and then proceeded to change 4 steps this year because curiosity is a stronger spice than any jar holds. The shift to pumpkins made room for bigger play. A row of porch lanterns turned a street into a gentle runway for the night. Pathways were marked without shouting. You could guess who liked jokes and who liked quiet just from the faces. A narrow grin, a wide wow, a sleepy bar with droopy lids that looked like it needed a nap, and a cup of something restorative. Of course, pumpkins vat floor. They sag. The first night they are dignified. The second night they are charming. The third night they are retiring from public life. This keeps the tradition honest. The faces do not last forever. The season does. You carve again next year and try a different smile. Bonfires adapted too. In new towns, the big communal blaze sometimes gave way to smaller backyard fires or shared braziers. The principle remained. Gather around a centre. Keep an eye on sparks. Tell the joke that only works when everyone already knows the punchline. Repeat it anyway. The repetition is the point. Some places formalised safety more tightly as neighbourhoods grew dense. Buckets on corners, sand barrels by the gate, a list of what not to burn because nobody wants to smell whatever that was. The list always included wet leaves. Wet leaves promise to burn and then choose a life of smoke and regret. Do not trust them. Warding never left the script. A lantern by the door is a polite no to trouble. A bowl of treats is a polite yes to visitors. A candle in the window is a hello to memory. When the porch is lit, the road feels friendlier. When the road feels friendlier, more feet walk it. When more feet walk it, the wind gets bored and goes bother a field that deserves it. People still told the rule about crossroads. If you feel watched at the crossing, say good evening to the air and keep walking. If a light darts where no lantern should be, do not chase it. If a whisper says your name from behind and from ahead in the same breath, smile and decline. Even in a new land, old advice keeps you dry and on time. The pumpkin era encouraged creativity. A face became a scene became a story. Some carved a cat, some carved a moon, some carved the year because time likes to see itself written down. Children learned that a simple smile is hard to cut clean and therefore counts as high art. Adults learned that ambition creates confetti and that brooms were invented by a genius. Turnips still appear here and there like veteran actors returning for a cameo. Someone in the family insists on making key every year just to remember where the tradition started and to keep their hand in. The result sits on the step next to the big orange newcomer. The contrast is funny and perfect. Old guard and new hire pulling the same shift, both fierce. Faces are also a language. A sharp angle means stay out of my garden, rabbits. A soft curve means I baked too many cookies, please send help. Houses talk across the dark with light carved into expressions. You can walk a block and read a whole neighbourhood in pumpkins. That un is sarcastic. That un is sincere. That un is trying modern art and deserves applause for bravery. Meanwhile, the heart of the night refuses to be complicated. It asks the same things each year. Light something. Share something. Remember someone. Laugh at least once. Keep watch without grinding your teeth. Teach the small hands to be careful with flame and generous with bread. These habits are better than any charm. A last note about the job title. Pumpkins did not steal anything from turnips. They inherited a role and scaled it. The spirit of the lantern is older than both. It is a portable hearth, a smiling bouncer, a story on a step. The material is the costume, the meaning is the same. Make the dark less bossy. Picture the end of the night. The big fire is a bed of coals. The small fires think about sleep. The turnip face and the pumpkin face sag in friendly competition. Someone carries in the last lantern. Someone checks the bucket. Someone says, "That was good, we will do it again," and no one argues. Next year is already penciled in the air. If you pass by in the quiet, you can smell a mix of smoke, earth, and the sweet ghost of squash. You can hear cooling iron tick on a trivet. You can see tiny points of light where windows forget to close their curtains all the way. You know without asking that names were said, jokes were told, and the village negotiated another treaty with the night. It is a treaty the night usually honours, mostly because the snacks are excellent. So that is why bonfires matter. That is how turnips got the first contract. That is how pumpkins won the expansion pack. The exact details shift. The engine stays the same. Fire to gather, faces to signal, light to travel between doors and worlds with manners. Put those together, and you have a map through late autumn that even pack a trunk, not a fancy steamer trunk, a stubborn one that smells like soap, wool, and a handful of letters. This chapter crosses the ocean with the people who carried autumn on their backs. Fire, faces, jokes, and kindness did not stay put. They boarded ships beside bread and worry. When the ships reached new harbours, the habits climbed down the gangplank and went looking for neighbourhoods that needed them. The 19th century moved bodies like tides. Famines shoved, work pulled. Letters from cousins said there is a job if you can hold a hammer and pretend to like it. Ireland sent many, Scotland sent many, England sent plenty. So did places farther east and south. Cities grew like fields of brick. Tenements stacked lives. Streets learned 50 accents. The newcomers brought tools you can see and tools you cannot. Among the invisible tools was a way to tame long nights with flame, food, jokes, and a ritual that says we belong if we share. Autumn in the new land looked familiar and not. The air still bit, the leaves still flared and fell. Markets had apples in friendly mountains and pumpkins in arrogant heaps. Churches rang bells, saloons rang different bells. Workdays ran long, nights needed help. The old island customs stretched, shrugged, and fit themselves to new blocks, new porches, new back alleys that felt like secret theatres. At first the season arrived in pieces. Irish enclaves kept bonfires when space allowed. Scottish families kept guising, and expected you to earn a treat with a song or a joke. English households leaned on souling memories, and the habit of making rounds with small gifts and large blessings. Neighbours from other places watched, sampled, added their own flavours, and said so that is how you keep the dark in a good mood. Noted. Cities had a talent for mischief. The same crowd energy that makes a parade makes a mess if it gets bored. Autumn nights in the late 19th century flirted with rowdiness. Gates did not travel to fields anymore. They travelled to rooftops, and then down again when someone with a short temper and a tall ladder got involved. Wooden sidewalks, where they existed, made tempting drums for boys who believed the world needed percussion at midnight. A cornfield prank in a rural lane could be funny. A trolley track prank in a city was not. Communities responded in the way community always respond when they are smart. They gave the energy a job. Settlement houses and church clubs hosted socials. Masked parades formed with lanterns and chaperones. Schoolteachers declared that costumes should be clever, not cruel, and then awarded ribbons in a system so generous that no one went home feeling invisible. Police captains, who understood budgets, quietly cheered anything that turned potential vandalism into supervised sugar. The front porch turned into a stage. Families set lamps, then lanterns, then carved pumpkins as the big orange newcomer proved it could hold a candle without sulking. A lit porch became a signal. This house is playing. This house has something for the small and the bold. The unlit house said, "Come back tomorrow in daylight," like a polite sign in a shop window. Codes make cities friendlier because they save everyone the awkward guess. Door-to-door visits started to standardize. Some streets still preferred performance. You knocked. You told a joke. You sang. You recited a verse your grandmother polished like silver. You earned your treat. Other streets softened the rules for very small boots. A knock and a grin would do. Adults discovered that the quickest way to keep peace on an active block was to meet the block halfway. Candy in hand, compliment on deck, bucket of water brave and ready near the stooch just in case a lantern forgot itself. Newspapers loved the season. Editors published cheerful warning that you should not tip over outhouses or remove any doorknobs that you would later have to reinstall while a furious aunt watched. Advice columns offered patterns for costumes that could be made from an old sheet with minimal scandal. illustration artists drew postcards with cats, moons, owls, and grins. The postcards were not the holiday. They were the rumour that the holiday was now a proper guest, with a place at the table. The phrase trick or treat did not arrive on Calendar Square with a trumpet. It bubbled up in slang, then in print, then in habit. In the early decades of the 20th century, people in different towns heard children try it like a new song. The meaning was playful. Treat us kindly, and the trick stays in our pocket. The trick was supposed to be silly, not mean. A soaped window that came clean. A knock and run that landed next door and turned into a giggle with an apology. The phrase took root because it made the rules visible in numb breath. Halloween parties grew up inside houses, church basements, and school gyms. Games stayed familiar. Bobbing for apples, apples on strings, nuts in pans, new favourites joined. A ring baked in a cake, a prize hidden in a sack of sawdust that is absolutely a mess and absolutely worth it. Grown-ups stood at the edges with plates and careful eyes. Children learned the geography of a safe crowd and the pleasure of leaving a party tired for the right reasons. Costumes followed the logic of the city. Make it from what you have. Flour for a pale face, burnt cork for a moustache. A cardboard crown from a cereal box because kingdoms should be available on short notice. Immigrant neighbourhoods mixed styles without asking permission. You could see a shepherd from County Kerry walking beside a knight from a dime novel, and a witch from a woodcut dragged out of a library book by a kid who liked pictures more than paragraphs. The commercial world noticed. Stationers sold orange and black crepe paper. Milliners sold cheap masks that fit no human face but bravely pretended. 5 and dime stores offered paper skeletons and cardboard cats that could lean on a window and look pleased with themselves. The sale of small candles went up. So did the sale of laundry starch because someone decided a stiff cloak looked better and then regretted physics. A particular challenge haunted the season in the 19-teens and 1920s. Mischief occasionally slipped its leash. Some Halloween nights did damage that did not sweep up by morning. There were broken windows, trolley pranks, and fires set by the unserious and regretted by everyone. The answer that stuck was not more scolding, it was more structure. City councils partnered with civic clubs, paper decorations, organised parades, supervised parties, and front porch generosity beat vandalism the way warm bread beats a cold argument. What changed the most was the centre of gravity. The night moved toward children. Adults still walked and watched and joined, but the lead actors were small. Streets designed for work found a second purpose as play spaces lit by porches and chaperoned by gossip. The old idea of guising, earn your gift, blended with the gentler idea that childhood deserves easy wins. The exchange narrowed from cakes for prayers to treats for presents, and then to treats for a rhyme anyone could say. World events tugged at the season. During wartime, some places dimmed lights and trimmed partying. Sugar rationing during hard years put a limit on sweets. Communities pivoted to homemade candy, popcorn balls, and fruit wrapped like treasure. When peace returned and rationing lifted, the holiday exhaled. The habit of door-to-door survived the thin seasons because it had already proved itself as social glue. Porch talk deserves a small museum. Compliments became the currency that travelled with candy. Fine mask, grand cape, excellent cat whiskers. Children stood taller at the sound of it. Adults got to say nice things to a line of neighbours and be thanked for the effort, with grins sticky with caramel. An entire city could improve its mood in 2 hours, with nothing more than praise and a bowl of something sweet. Neighbourhoods learned the porch-light code. On. We are playing. Off. Not tonight. The code spared awkward knocks and protected those who needed quiet. It also created a rolling constellation when you looked down a street, dots of yes in a field of dark, a map drawn in light. It is hard to feel alone when your block draws a pattern that Safety became a skill, not a scare. Older kids escorted younger ones. Paper lanterns gave way to glass and then to tin and then to anything that did not tip in a breeze. Costumes tested for tripping hazards in the kitchen before they tried for glory on the steps. Police officers walked slow on purpose, the better to be seen as helpful scenery. The holiday survived by making wisdom look like tradition. The jokes stayed. They just got smaller and softer. A rubber spider dangled from a thread in a doorway. A cardboard ghost looked startled when anyone said boo first. The only windows that got soaped by the end of the 1930s were owned by uncles who wanted to feel young and did it with a wink and a rag ready in his pocket. Communities with many cultures made the night shine brighter. Black neighborhoods, immigrant streets, old families, new families, boarding houses with too many names on the same mailbox, all found ways to join. Some blocks organized shared stoops where a neighbor on the night shift left a bowl with a thank you note. Some porches served cider, some served stories. Children learned to cross a line of languages without tripping, because candy is fluent in everything. Front yards turned into small theatres of welcome. A sheet on a clothesline became an apparition that swayed more from laundry logic than from any haunting. A broom on a porch leaned like a witch who had a long commute. A radio by a window played a scratchy tune that turned any walk into an entrance. The entire city understood that it was participating in a charm against loneliness. The shape of the evening settled, late afternoon for the youngest, twilight for the school crowd. After dinner for the fearless, who had a cousin with a flashlight, and a parent who understood that the best memories wear sensible shoes. The final hour belonged to teenagers who traded jokes more than sweets, and occasionally built a hay bale throne on a stoop, before being told to put it back, because hay belongs where the landlord says it does. By the mid-20th century, trick-or-treat had gone from experiment to expectation in many places. Flyers at school reminded families to be home with lights on. Churches hosted community parties to anchor the night with music and pie. Row houses learned to decorate in a style best described as absolutely enthusiastic. Apartment buildings invented hallway parades, where every third door became a snack checkpoint, and the super pretended not to notice the traffic because his grandchildren were in the line. A quiet etiquette matured. Do not take more than one unless invited. Say thank you as if the porch were a stage, and manners were your line. Accept raisins with the same grace as candy, because maybe the giver has a budget and a principled belief in roughage. Wave to the neighbor who cannot hear well, and learn to read kindness in the way your shoulders move. Go home before the street forgets the difference between noisy and confused. Behind the candy and the crepe paper stood an older power. The night made neighbours visible. Names stuck. A person who had been just the man on the corner became the person who loved pirate costumes and needed help with his coal scuttle. A woman who always seemed stern became the auntie of the block when she came to the stoop with a cape made from a curtain and a laugh that unbuttoned the worry in your chest. The holiday recruited the city into its own care network by offering a small, delicious contract. Workers found their place in the rhythm. Cooks at restaurants handed out paper sacks to staff with a few sweets tucked in for children waiting at home. Transit drivers kept a spare stash near the fare box for young riders who had to make a stop before they made the rounds. Nurses traded shifts so the pediatric wing could host a hallway of costumes. The night is generous to those who keep lights on for other people. Stories from the old countries adapted to new streets. A will-o'-the-wisp became a porch light that flickered at a mischievous angle. A crossroads spirit became the habit of looking both ways twice, and then greeting the air with a good evening for luck. The man with the lantern roaming forever learned to ride the last city bus and ring the bell for stops nobody minded pausing at. Because pausing is polite. The pumpkin sealed its leadership in this era. Porches glowed like small harvest moons. Patterns were shared across fences. Someone carved a cat with ears so pointy the whole block cheered. Someone tried lettering and learned that curved lines in pumpkin flesh require the patience of a saint. The faces told the story of the neighborhood without words. Friendly, fierce, funny, shite, experimental, tired but trying. Parents negotiated the line between care and the thrill of a brisk night with your friends. Rules were clear and short. Stay with your group, do not go into houses, say thank you, use the crosswalk like it owes you money, come home when your pocket is full or your feet complain, whichever happens first. The kids nodded, sprinted, and then followed the rules because even a wild heart enjoys a map that gets it more candy. What makes this the birth of modern trick-or-treat is not invention. It is a set of small agreements that clicked. A porch light as a yes, a costume as a password, a knock as a promise of joy without debt, a city willing to be soft for a few hours and call that softness a strength, an autumn ritual that made room for anyone who wanted in, from the shyest child to the loudest uncle to the new family 2 doors down still learning the names on the mailboxes. Across decades, the night kept adjusting, because that is what living traditions do. When traffic grew, neighborhoods set boundaries and earlier hours. When apartments multiplied, hallways hosted routes, and lobbies hosted bowls with handwritten notes that said please leave some for the next pirate. When worries rose in one year or another, communities added reflectors, flashlights, and the buddy system, and kept the door open anyway. If you want a single image to pin to the wall, take this. A block of small houses under trees that look like fireworks paused. Pumpkins at every other step. Children in piles of cloth and confidence. Grown-ups pretending they are not delighted. A chorus of thank you rolling from porch to porch like tidewater. The smell of leaves, wool, and 100 different candies pretending to be the same candy. This is the shape of a neighborhood deciding to be a village for night. The old island heart beats inside it, light against dark, laughter against fear. Memory invited to sit at the table, not to haunt but to comfort. The trade has changed from soul cakes for prayers to treats for courtesy, but the engine is familiar. Feed, bless, remember, laugh, repeat. The distance from a hill fire to a porch light is long on a map and short in the chest. We can end the walk where the sidewalk ends, at a corner store. The clerk recognizes 3 costumes from last year and pretends to be fooled anyway. He slides a bag of small lollipops across the counter, labelled for latecomers. Outside, the air has that iron taste you get before frost. The city hums, patient and kind for once. The night is busy, not dangerous. The holiday has done its job. Open the closet. Ignore the sensible coat. Tonight is for outfits that make neighbours clap on porches and strangers talk to each other like cousins. Costumes are how Halloween learned to speak without moving its lips. Over a century and more, clothes took turns telling the story. Homemade to store-bought, bedsheet to blockbuster, shy to showy, always with a wink. Start at the simple end. A sheet with 2 eye holes, the classic. It is fast, it is humble, it tangles on stairs like it has personal vendetta, but it lets anyone be a ghost without a committee meeting. That matters. The sheet is the Democrat of costumes. It says the door is open, the light is on, come be ridiculous with us, we will love you anyway. Before the sheet there was the mask by the fire, a soot smear, a winter scarf turned mysterious, a hood worn low. Medieval guising and early modern mumming preferred suggestion over accuracy. Be anyone, be nobody, be safe behind a hint. A disguise does not need to be perfect. It only needs to help the night feel playful instead of sharp. As urban parties grew in the 19th and early 20th centuries, so did the costume drawer. Households made magic from leftovers. A cape from curtain cloth, a crown from cardboard, a witch hat from felt that smelled like last year's attic, a moustache drawn with a burnt cork that left tidy smudges on every teacup at the party. The budget sat down and made friends with imagination. They stayed friends for decades. Masks started to arrive in shops, pressed paper, tin, early plastics. Some were elegant, some were horrors for the wrong reasons. The elastic bit your ear, the eye holes blinked sideways. The smell was a haunted factory. You wore them anyway for 10 minutes and then pushed them up like a headband because breathing is a hobby worth keeping. Masquerade had a longer history in ballrooms and carnivals. Halloween borrowed the pose and simplified the materials. People knew how to be a character for an evening. The new twist was that every porch became a ballroom, and the dress code was, yes please if you have the time. High art did not apply, good humour did. Identity play thrived. Costumes let you pull the cork on bravery in a safe way. A shy child inside a lion mane makes eye contact for the first time with a neighbour and gets a candy and a compliment for it. A tired parent puts on a cape and remembers that fun does not require sleep, only momentum. A teen tries the villain and discovers it is easier to be kind after you have let the edge out for an hour and fed it a cookie. The greatest hits roster formed early: witch, ghost, skeleton, devil with a budget of one headband and a sidelong grin, cat with whiskers smeared by the first cup of cider, clown before clowns scared anybody, pirate with a pillowcase and a swagger that improved with practice. Native figures and other cultural stereotypes also appeared, those aged poorly. Communities learned to retire the hurtful tropes and keep the creative spark. Progress is a tailoring job you never finish, but you get better at stitching every year. Movie culture stepped in with a large hat and a laugh. Serial adventures, then talkies, then television brought heroes to doorstep scale. Cowboys walked beside spacemen. Swashbucklers discovered that capes plus staircases equals drama. Monsters from novels and films broke free of screens and became neighbourhood regulars. Dracula went from literature to theatre, to film, to a cape that any aunt could hem for a nephew, with opinions. Why do vampires last? They are tidy, cape, teeth, attitude. They promise elegance and a bedtime before dawn. The look works in any decade. The jokes write themselves. A polite monster is a social fixture. Also, black is easy to match and hides a multitude of spilled treats. Fashion forgives the undead, if they keep their hems straight. Witches endure because the silhouette makes sense. A tall hat to be seen in crowds. A dress that can hide thermal layers under it without complaint. A broom as a prop that doubles as a useful tool when confetti appears. The moral scripts shift by era, but the costume survives because it is readable from half a block away and can be achieved with one trip to the kitchen drawer and one to the closet. Skeletons last because bones are excellent design and glow-in-the-dark paint exists. A black suit with white lines. Done. Add a smile on a skull and you have friendly spooky. Add a shawl and you have grandmother spooky. Add a bow tie and you have prom spooky. The skeleton is neutral. It lets you dial the scare from museum docent to mild chaos with a single eyebrow, real or painted. The 20th century saw a costume economy wake up. Catalogues offered entire outfits. 5 and 10 stores hung masks on pegs like a paper forest. By mid-century, boxed costumes with printed jumpsuits and thin masks appeared in bright aisles. Children peered at the art on the box like it was a promise. Sometimes the inside matched the picture. Sometimes it was a full-body lesson in expectations. Either way, memory did the kind edit and kept the glow. Homemade never left. Grandparents made a point of it. A cardboard robot with dry event arms, a sandwich board that turned a kid into a book cover, a dragon with scales cut from cereal boxes and painted with the serious focus of a weekend that got away from everyone in the best way. The wins were shared, the failures were funny. The night accepted both with the same applause. Store-bought came with advantages: reflective stripes, warmer fabric, safer fasteners, printed patterns so even a last-minute scramble looked like a plan. The trick was, and is, balance. Buy the base, add the story, tape on the odd detail from the junk drawer that makes a store costume yours. A plastic helmet becomes personal, with a sticker and a scuff you can blame on heroics. Adults moved from chaperones to co-stars. Office parties gave permission that neighborhoods continued. A witch hat at the door became a full look on the porch. Parents started to coordinate with children. Pirates with pint-sized first mates. Astronauts with mission control in a bathrobe. Family themes took over photos. A row of matching ears on a couch is hard to beat for charm. Masquerade rules adapted to safety. Masks opened up for better vision. Capes shortened to avoid drama with sidewalk cracks. Hemlines learned to negotiate stairs. Shoes stayed sensible even when the outfit begged for something glamorous. A glow stick tucked into a waistband became fashion and function. No one minds safety when it twinkles. The second half of the century added superheroes with capes, and without them. Lycra met October. So did cardboard shields that could stop 2 raindrops and 0 siblings. Comic books met television, met film, and left almost every block with a tiny league of protectors who promised to return home by 9 and brush their teeth, even if fangs were involved. Horror films added more creatures to the lineup. Wolves joined vampires for the night shift. Mummies practiced their walk. Zombies learned to groan politely on porches where small children stood. The neighborhood edited the scare to fit the audience. Loud at the party, soft at the door. The best costumes come with a dimmer switch and a sense of humor. Craft stores and thrift shops became secret allies. A jacket that once had a life at a wedding could become a magician's coat with a handful of ribbon. A lampshade could become a space helmet with optimism and a careful knife. A broken umbrella could become bat wings with an hour of cleverness. Halloween turns trash into theatre, and then teaches recycling without a sermon. Mascots of the holiday grew crisp lines, black cats, friendly ghosts, scarecrows with straw hair and the expression of someone who has seen things and refuses to speak until fed. These figures were costumes, decorations, and backdrops all at once. Children climbed into them. Porches posed them. Photos banked them for the long winter ahead. Cultural shifts required new care. Communities learned what not to wear because respect matters more than a sight gag. People made lists and passed them around. Do not paint your skin to mimic a people. Do not borrow sacred dress for a laugh. Do not make someone's identity your prop. The holiday is large enough to be fun without stepping on anyone. A good rule is, ask, would I wear this if I had to explain it to the person I am pretending to be? If the answer is no, pick the pumpkin suit instead. The pumpkin suit never offends. Gender play stayed part of the night, with kinder edges across time. A costume let some people try the mirror from a new angle, and a festival gave the street a reason to say nice hat without a meeting. For others, dress up was just play, and stayed that way. The lanes learn to treat both with equal courtesy and a focus on candy. Candy is famously objective. The rise of film blockbusters changed the scale. Entire galaxies had merchandise. Families could coordinate as heroes, villains, or the side characters who have 3 lines and all the charm. Crowds learned to recognize franchises at a glance. That recognition built fast friendships in lines. Nice mask. Great armor. How did you do the shoulders? A porch became a Comic-Con for 3 minutes at a time, with better snacks. Between homemade and licensed sat the hybrid. A thrifted coat plus a store hat plus a hand-cut logo. This is where most brilliance lives. Constraints produce invention. The best compliments are the ones that say, "I see what you were going for and you nailed it." Those are the compliments that turn into stories that get retold every year until the costume is myth and the hot glue burns a legend. Why do some costumes repeat forever? Because they are archetypes, not trends. Witch equals wit plus will. Ghost equals memory you can walk beside. Skeleton equals the blueprint of being human without the arguments. Cat equals independence with purrs on demand. Pirate equals lawless with a candy quota. These are roles that let people act how they wish they could act all year, then return to ordinary with no fines assessed. Group costumes solved the band problem. Not everyone wants to solo. A trio of crayons, a deck of cards, a murder of crows with tiny name tags that read Crow 1, Crow 2, Crow 3, because humour likes labels. Schools loved group ideas because it kept groups visible. Parents loved them because the photo did the framing for them. Kids loved them because it felt like being a squad with official law. Pet costumes arrived and declared themselves essential. A dog in a cape made entire blocks healthier. A cat in a hat tolerated exactly that photograph, and then retired to the upstairs study to write pointed letters. Guinea pigs in tiny bat wings tried to remain calm and mostly succeeded. The rule for animals is always comfort first. The reward for people is always joy, with bonus squeaks. Minimalist costumes had their moment. A name tag that said, "Hello, I am a ghost." A plain black outfit with a paper moon. A cardboard sign that said, "Bite me," pinned to a bunch of grapes where each grape was a balloon. The laughter per minute was as high as any deluxe outfit. Effort is welcome, wit is welcome, wallet size does not measure charm. Makeup grew into its own craft. A pale face with shadows could turn anyone into an instant legend with cheekbones. A little fake blood went a long way and learned to stop before the porch lost its appetite. Face paint learned to bow to skincare. Remover wipes rode in pockets the way bandages ride in bags. A costume that has a tidy exit makes friends with bedtime. Accessibility and inclusion shaped better design. Costumes that fit over wheelchairs and turned them into ships, dragons and chariots. Sensory-friendly fabrics. Quiet neighborhoods that scheduled early hours with low noise. Candy choices that respected allergies, marked by a colored pumpkin or a sign. The best costumes are not just worn, they welcome. The holiday is best when the door is truly open. Storage taught lessons. If a costume folds flat, it returns next year as something else. If it requires its own closet, consider a different path unless you already live in a theatre. The smartest households kept a bin labelled capes and opinions. They reached in each October and pulled out just enough history to let a new idea stand on older shoulders. Photos turned moments into anchors. Scrapbooks held decades of witches, wizards, wolves and children who went from tiny pumpkins to tall skeletons in what felt like 3 pages. Looking back teaches a soft truth. No one regrets a costume that made a neighbour smile. People regret the nights they stayed home because work was loud and they forgot to be silly. The cure is to keep a hat near the door where you can grab it on your way out. Technology joined politely. battery lights inside pumpkins, clip-on LEDs along hems, voice changers that drew a line at the porch so Grandpa could still understand the thank you. Phones took photos that travelled across oceans so cousins could admire a cape in real time and vote that it should be worn again at breakfast for research purposes. Trends came and went. A season of alias, a season of wizards, a season of everyone dressed as a character from a show that the next year no one remembered, which is fine because the point was never cultural memory. The point was being together in costumes that created instant conversation for neighbours who needed a reason to talk and found a dozen. Meanwhile, the old standard kept humming. A simple ghost, a simple witch, a simple pirate, a simple cat. The four chords of the holiday. A child in a black hat, a star pinned on with a safety pin, and a wooden spoon as a wand can collect praise like a pop star. The porch does not grade on novelty, it grades on delight. Delight is easy to pass. The best test for a costume is the walk test. Can you climb a stoop, hold a rail, hold a bag, and say thank you without losing your hat or your dignity? If yes, you have designed well. If no, edit. Remove the bit that makes your ankle negotiate with gravity. Add a pocket. A pocket is a miracle. So is a pin. So is the friend who says I will carry your tail when you take the stairs. At the end of the night, costumes tell on you in charming ways. Glitter on a pillowcase announces that a fairy slept well. A cape on a chair back proves someone with ordinary shoulders carried a hero's day. A smudge of paint on a teacup says the cat Whiskers drank milk and will do it again. Laundry becomes a diary, written in small stains and stubborn sequins. Why does dress-up matter so much? Because it gives people a safe container for play. It lets a neighbourhood see itself as theatre cast and audience at once. It lowers the cost of conversation. It makes memory sticky. It lets a person rehearse a braver self for an hour and then pocket a little of that bravery for November. It puts everyone on the same team under the same moon with the same dumb jokes about fangs and diet plans and broom parking. So open the closet again. The sensible coat will get its turn tomorrow. Tonight, pick the thing that makes you grin before you put it on. The thing that will win a compliment from the stern neighbour and a high five from the toddler who has decided you are best friends for the next 6 minutes. The thing that will photograph badly but live in your head perfectly. That is the right costume. When the porch lights click off and the street sighs, hang the outfit somewhere it can dry and somewhere you can see it while you wash dishes. It will remind you that you are allowed to be a character now and then. The world did not break. It got kinder for a few hours. The costume helped. It always does. Open the cupboard. Ignore the soup. Tonight is about candy, the tiny square currency that brought peace between generations and taught whole neighbourhoods the art of supply chains without a single spreadsheet. We are going to talk about how sweets moved from bakery trays to factory lines to pillowcases and then to the sofa, where everybody counted like little bankers with sugar on their lips. Once upon a century, treats were mostly homemade. Sugar was a guest, not a roommate. A good bun was a triumph. A toffee pulled on a cool night was family theatre. Then industry got interested. Machines learned to wrap. Kettles learned to scale up. Boxes learned to advertise. Candy stepped out of the kitchen and into every corner shop that could fit a glass jar and a scoop. The holiday saw an opportunity. Door-to-door giving needs items that are small, inexpensive, and safe to hand out fast. Cake is lovely but crumbly. Nuts are fine but divisive. Apples are perfect until someone drops a sack and regrets physics. Candy fits the job like it was born for it. Because it was. Enter the idea of seasonalization. A plain sweet can become a Halloween sweet if you give it an outfit. Orange wrapper, black cat on the label, pumpkin on the display. Same sugar, different costume. A shopkeeper can mark a calendar with inventory numbers the way a farmer marks rain on a doorframe. October earned its own line because the till rang whenever a porch light did. Families embraced the ritual because it solved several problems at once. Candy is portion control you can count, it stores without a sermon, it pleases a wide age band with minimal negotiation, it can be offered by the fistful to a group of kids dressed as wolves without anyone asking where to put the plates. This is logistics candy, not just dessert. Packaging learned tricks. Bright colours that survived low light, sizes that fit a little hand, corners that did not stab a pocket. Clear print for grown-ups who needed to check an ingredient list in a gust of wind with 12 pirates in the queue. An entire design department worked overtime so a porch exchange could happen in 3 seconds with a please and a thank you. The phrase fun size arrived like a polite sales clerk. It said, "Do not worry about a mountain of sugar. These are tiny." It also said, "Do not worry about your budget. These are many." A bag poured into a bowl made you rich in small coins. Children agreed to the fiction. Fun size became a unit of measurement, like inches, but stickier. Advertising settled on a fall tone that mixed harvest and party. Pictures of pumpkins sat beside grins that could only be achieved with caramel. Store aisles turned orange and black, like a flock of helpful birds had decided to nest there. Displays rose like little pyramids of temptation that dared you to walk past without a bag, and then laughed when you returned from the next aisle with 2. We should talk about the route from factory to fist. Warehouses fill in late summer, trucks roll early, shops place orders by the crate, then by the pallet when they remember what last year looked like at 6:30 on the big night. A clerk in a back room prints a sign that says while supplies last, and secretly hopes supplies will not last, because sweeping an empty shelf feels like winning. Household economics found a sweet spot. A bag or 2 could cover a block during prime time. If the bowl ran low, someone deployed the backup plan: pretzels, raisins, the mysterious hard candy that lives in a glass dish and never expires. Most kids accepted the trade with dignity. The holiday taught grace under substitution long before airlines tried it. Candy sorted itself into archetypes: chocolate with opinions, caramel that educated fillings, toffees that negotiated with molars like diplomats, fruit chews that made every pocket smell like a citrus festival, licorice determined to be controversial on purpose, hard candy that promised patience and delivered it unless you bit down because you are human. Neighborhood law formed around favorites. One porch gave out full bars and became a pilgrimage site. Another handed each child a tiny paper sack with a mixed handful and a note in perfect cursive that said Happy Halloween in more ink than should be possible on such small cards. The note ended up on refrigerators and scrapbook pages. The sack ended up in school lunches and legends. Candy also became a language for adults. A bowl by the office door said, "We are participating in joy. Please respect the stapler." A jar at the reception desk said, "You have permission to be 6 for 4 seconds." A cup in a teacher's drawer said, "I see you October, you are a lot. Have a caramel and behave." Urban legends rose like fog in the late 20th century and tried to scare the sweetness out of the night. Tales flew about hidden dangers, as if neighborhoods were full of villains with tiny toolkits and poor time management. Communities responded with common sense and checks, with supervised events for those who wanted them, and with the oldest safety net of all, which is neighbors who know each other by name and by the way their porch smells when the oven is on. The truth under the rumor was always the same. The most reliable dangers were cars that did not see, costumes that tripped, and sugar eaten like a competitive sport. So the holiday adjusted. Reflectors, shorter capes, a snack before starting, a bottle of water tucked into the wagon beside the dragon who has decided to ride after Block 3. The scary stories shrank when confronted with real lists and bright vests. Candy corporations learned to act like holiday planners. Limited editions, special mixes named for neighborhoods and moods, ads that staged little dramas on porches where a bar of chocolate became the hero who bridged a truce between a princess and a dinosaur. People bought the story along with the snack because the story was true. Candy is a fixer in October. The economics scaled up to national sport. Forecasts were made with the gravity of weather reports. Will it be a mild night? Expect extra foot traffic. Will it rain? Expect emergency bowls for the hardy, and plan for leftovers with recipes that claim to transform surplus candy into respectable desserts. None of the recipes work as well as eat a piece and take a walk, but the lists are fun. Leftovers created a secondary market called Breakfast Minus Shame. A tiny bar with coffee is a treaty between morning and memory. Offices sprouted communal bowls labelled Please Rescue Me. Volunteers in all professions discovered that a pocket full of small sweets makes paperwork go down easier, for people who do not want to fill out forms, and for the person asking them to fill out forms. Then came the allergy era, long overdue in its clarity. Signs appeared. Nut-free, gluten-free. Please ask. A teal pumpkin on a porch meant safe options for kids who need to read labels, as if the labels are prophecies. This was not a burden, it was a courtesy that improved the holiday by putting welcome in writing. Candy companies followed with clear icons, and parents exhaled. Portion guidelines became a family sport. Some kids ate a few pieces nightly with the discipline of monks. Some tried to set land speed records and learned about stomachs the hard way. Most households found a rhythm. Share with siblings. Trade with friends. Store the stash in a tin that used to hold buttons and now holds a civilization. Everyone learned the currency of swaps. 2 caramels for a peanut butter cup. 1 gummy snake for 3 peppermints if the day had a math test. Markets learned to sweep the holiday from shelf to shelf like a tide. In September the displays stretched. In mid-October they curled around every corner. On November 1st a sign appeared like a sunrise announcing discounts that felt like cheating. People bought for next year, and for this weekend, and for a recipe that lives only in the heart and is called sometimes. It is still Halloween at 3 in the afternoon. Homemade never left the party. Fudge trays appeared at church events with labels from stern aunts that warned Miss Square only and dared you to ignore the wisdom. Popcorn balls returned like comets. Caramel apples took a victory lap with sticks that snapped at exactly the wrong moment and sent caramel into space. Nobody minded. Stickiness builds community. Candy bowls became social instruments. A deep bowl said we have budget or ambition or both. A shallow bowl said we are early in the shift, be kind. A sign that said please take why was an experiment in ethics. Usually it worked. When it did not, a friendly ghost decoration shook its head in the morning, with the grace of a saint who remembers being 7 and greedy and forgives the entire species. The economics of giving spread. People who could buy more did so on purpose to cover for porches that could not. Apartment supers left bowls on the desk so tenants could bring some upstairs to the floors without participants. Teachers stocked their own tables for students who went home to quiet houses and needed to taste the holiday all the same. The market cannot measure that kind of wealth, but the block can. We should pause for the simple miracle of a wrapped sweet delivered with a smile. It is a low-tech gift, it requires no charging, it needs no tutorial. It tells a child you are seen, and tells a parent you are accompanied, and tells a neighbour you are part of the map. A city can be enormous, until a single candy turns it into a village for 5 seconds. This is not sentiment, it is infrastructure. Candy Uso taught time management. The smart child learned to eat the fragile things first and save the sturdy for later. The smart adult learned to buy the sturdies for late arrivals. Caramels are sprinters, hard mints are marathoners. Chocolate should watch the weather and dress accordingly. Nougat will do what nougat wants. The rest of us must cope. The holiday converted entire aisles into education labs. Kids learned brand recognition the way sailors learn stars. Parents learned unit price math against a deadline while their team cheered for the bag with the good mix. Everyone learned that a bowl is never big enough, because a half-full bowl looks stingy and a full bowl looks nervous, so the correct answer is a bowl that has just been refilled. Doorbell patterns created data sets. A first wave of toddlers required soft things and gentle compliments. A second wave of grade schoolers wanted chocolate and a joke. A third wave of teenagers wanted anything, and a look that said, "We are glad you are still playing, stay as long as you like." The wise porch stocked accordingly and felt like a tiny logistics firm with a heart. Business habits around the night expanded. Bakeries did orange icing. Coffee shops did pumpkin ideas with names that could fund a small library. Pharmacies placed candy near the cough drops, an arrangement that felt like an honest picture of October. Hardware stores taught the public that a good extension cord is as vital as a good costume. The economy is a chorus, and Halloween taught it a new harmony. Candy bag engineering improved. Pillowcases ruled for generations, because they are durable, washable, and democratic. Buckets arrived with characters on them and handles that felt brave until the load grew heroic. Reusable totes showed up with slogans that promised sustainability and a capacity that laughed at the phrase "last house." Wagons served as cargo ships for big crews and for toddlers who ran out of steam at house 6 and needed to ride like royalty guarding a horde. At home after the rounds the audit began. Piles on the carpet. Chocolate here, chewy they. Trades negotiated like peace talks. Parents did the safety glance that was 90% ritual, 10% common sense about wrappers and allergies. Then came the treaty. A peace now. A peace after homework. A peace when someone remembers to put the boots away without being asked. The economy of incentives wrapped in foil. Candy Ooze walked into November with purpose. A small piece turned a lunch into a secret festival. A stash in a desk drawer turned a grey afternoon into an event. Some people donated extra bags to shelters and schools. Some people mailed a box to a cousin on base. The night expands its kindness if the leftovers know what to do. The soundtrack of the market had its own poetry. A cash register chirp. A bag rust. A child rehearsing a thank you in line because thank you is half the candy. The clerk who smuggled a second lollipop into the bag because a sibling was waiting outside with big eyes. The manager who stayed late to restock because an empty shelf on October 31st is legal but unkind. The candy economy wrote unwritten rules for fairness. Do not hand out anything you would not eat yourself. Match portion to crowd. Leave a bowl if you must leave early and trust the best about the next visitor. Keep something aside for the late kid who takes care of siblings and can only start after the little ones fall asleep. The night makes room when people worry that the holiday is too commercial, the answer is gentle. Yes, it sells things. Also, yes, it buys something you cannot stock in a warehouse. It buys a conversation. It buys a smile from a person who has not smiled all week. It buys a memory that glows like a porch, a long time after the wrappers are recycled and the bowl retires to hold keys again. The jokes around candy are simple and charming. I will only have one, says the person with 3 wrappers practicing invisibility in their palm. I am testing for safety, says the parent with the spooky grin. This is for the office, says the shopper, who knows the office will get half and the household will get the other half, and both halves will swear they got the smaller half. The holiday understands fraction. If you want a final image of the candy economy at work, step outside at peak hour. The street is a river of footsteps and soft laughter. Bowls are little islands where currents pause. The words have a rhythm. Trick or treat. Thank you. Happy Halloween. Good night. The trade is fast and kind. The price is nothing. The value is everything. Then the wave passes. Bowls are lighter. Rappers whisper. Lights click off at by wine like stars deciding to sleep. Inside, someone ties up a bag of extras for tomorrow's lunch. Someone else folds a pillowcase and presses it to their face because it smells like leaves and chocolate and weather. The economy winds down without a bell. It will open again next year with the same hours and improved staffing. So here is the whole chapter in one neat wrapper. Candy turned a night into a system. Factories fed stores, stores fed bowls, bowls fed children and jokes and the idea that we live near friends, even when we forget. The sweets changed shape and label and size, but their job stayed steady. Put sugar where fear might go. Put a gift where loneliness might sit. Put a small thank you in the hand of every traveller, then watch how kindly a city can walk. Stand on a map and spin slowly. The lights you see in late October are not identical, but they talk to each other. A porch in Ohio, a street in Osaka, a cemetery in Manila, a plaza in Mexico City where marigolds glow like small suns. Halloween travelled, but it did not travel alone. It met older feasts, borrowed polite ideas, and learned new steps. The result is a season with accents. Start with Mexico and be clear. Dia de Muertos is its own tradition with its own deep roots. Families build ofrendas with photos, candles, and favourite foods to welcome the dead home. Sugar skulls are sweet, not scary. Cempasúchil flowers lead the way with scent and colour. Calacas smile because love keeps them lively. It sits on November days near All Saints and All Souls, but it is not Halloween in a costume, it is a homecoming. Visit it with respect. Learn from it, do not flatten it into a mask at a party. Across Latin America you find neighbours with related rhythms. In Guatemala, giant kites rise, painted with care, to carry messages toward the dead and back again. In Bolivia, a bread called tantawawa shows up shaped like little people. In Haiti, Fete Hegede honours the spirits with music, dance and candles in purple and black. These are not imports from a mall aisle. They are local, vivid and generous. The global season is bigger than what name. Now look to the Philippines. Families travel for undas around All Saints and All Souls. Cemeteries brighten like towns. Tents go up. Candles burn. Food is shared. Laughter is normal. Memory sits down and eats. If a kid runs past with a paper mask because cousins brought a light costume game, nobody argues with joy. The blend is gentle. The core is family. Turn to Europe and the old heartland. In Ireland and Scotland, where much of our story began, Halloween never really left. Guising remained. Bonfires and apple games stayed. Later, modern trick-or-treat returned from North America like a cheerful relative who learned new songs and wants to teach them. The welcome was easy. The jokes already fit. England kept bits and traded others. Soul cakes once held the stage. Later, the 5th of November grew its own blaze a few nights after, crowding the calendar with fire. In some towns, the two nights nod at each other across the week. Safety rules travel between them like helpful cousins. The lesson is steady. Fire is lovely. fire needs chaperones. In Wales you will hear of Nos Galan Gaeaf, a night at the start of winter with old customs and the sense that a thin boundary needs careful manners. In Brittany and Galicia old tales are stubborn, and the wind likes to remind people of crossroads and courtesy. The map shows different names. The air tells the same truth. The year is turning, be kind. On the continent the picture is varied. In Italy the days around Ognissanti are for saints, souls and family visits. In Spain and Catalonia you can find chestnuts, sweet potatoes and panellets in the Castañada, a feast that tastes like warmth. In Portugal children once went door to door asking for pão por Deus, a small bread for God, and in some places they still do. The modern doorbell rhythm folds into older cadences without breaking them. Germany and its neighbours balance late October with Reformation Day in some regions. Halloween as a party and parade grew over recent decades, helped by television, shops, and people who enjoy a good excuse to be a vampire. Some dislike the trend, others like the fun. The compromise is the same as always. Keep the noise reasonable, keep the bread on the table, let the neighbours sleep when the clock insists. Across the Nordic countries the season has a smaller footprint, but it is there. Candles in windows, pumpkins as cheerful guests, school parties with apple games that look very familiar indeed. In some places the bigger ancestor moment happens on All Saints weekend, when cemeteries gleam with lanterns and the quiet is its own comfort. A block can host a silly night and a solemn night, and call both a success. In North America the holiday became a large lantern that cast light outward. Costume ideas, porch codes and candy economies flew across the ocean on airplane seats and streaming screens. But traffic was not one way. Ideas came back. Old Apple games returned wearing new sweaters. Stories from grandparents found new listeners who realized with surprise that their modern knights had been practicing old moves all along. Turn east. Japan did not adopt a door-to-door tradition in the same way, but streets learned to host enormous costume parades and parties where creativity goes for a walk and the sidewalks cheer. Cosplay culture made October feel native. Trains carried witches with briefcases, salarymen with painted fangs, and a delicate sense that public space can be playful for a night if everyone is polite and goes home on time. It's a buck. In Korea, autumn belongs first to Chuseok, earlier in the season, but late October learned to borrow a little space for costumes in city districts and theme parks. In Singapore and Hong Kong, malls and neighbourhoods decorate in ways that feel like friendly theatre. In China, the Ghost Festival lives in a different month, with its own rites and paper offerings. October may still wear a light costume in some places because the night is charming and businesses enjoy a theme. The conversation between calendars is ongoing and mostly cheerful. Australia and New Zealand met Halloween like neighbours at a fence. Some embraced the fun early, others shook heads politely and waited. Over time porch lights appeared in clusters, then in rows. The rule that says do not knock if the porch is dark travelled well. Spring weather changes the feel. Pumpkins do not always line up with seasons there, but markets and makers found answers. The central idea does not need frost to thrive, it needs permission. The Middle East and North Africa show a mixed map, where expatriate communities gather, parties and school events sprout, where local customs already hold the space around saints and souls. October remains quiet, and November speaks a different dialect. The lesson holds across regions. Holidays travel best when they arrive as guests, not rulers. The internet turned October into a global chat room. Tutorials taught carving, sewing, makeup, and the delicate art of turning cardboard into a spaceship. Videos mixed spooky and cozy and taught people that a whisper and a teacup can be a mood. Live streams let cousins on 3 continents complement a costume in real time, and gently roast a pumpkin that collapsed because gravity likes humor. Online marketplaces pushed decorations into new hands. Some of it was disposable and loud. Much of it learned to be reusable, safer, and kinder to storage closets. The smartest trend was thrift. People learned to raid charity shops for fabric and props, and to brag about the costume that cost less than bus fare. Upcycling became a spell, with excellent results. Safety ideas travelled with the speed of a share button. Reflective tape on hems, battery candles inside pumpkins, route maps sent to a group chat, porch signs for allergy-friendly offerings, marked by a teal pumpkin so children could navigate with relief instead of worry. Communities added quiet hours for sensory needs. Blocks learned to cut the noise for the first round so tiny tigers did not wilt at the end of the driveway. Accessibility grew teeth and a grin. Driveways were cleared, ramps were borrowed and laid down, costumes were built around wheelchairs and walkers so the vehicle became the star, not an obstacle. Neighbours posted routes with the smoothest sidewalks. A season is mature when it does not just decorate for joy, but engineers for it. The global spread raised fair question. Is this all just commerce walking in a costume? Sometimes commerce does lead the parade with a banner that says, "Please buy 12 items you will never need again." Communities answered by anchoring the night in things that do not require a checkout. Light, music, stories, a bowl filled by someone who bought extra because the folks next door cannot this year. The better parts scaled up without price tags. Cultural borrowing asked for care. The rule is simple and patient. Celebrate without taking, admire without stealing. If a symbol is sacred to someone else, do not wear it as a joke. If a face belongs to a people, it is not paint for a party. Choose joy that does not step on toes. The menu is full. No one leaves hungry. Food waste learned to behave. Carved pumpkins became soup and bread bowls, seeds roasted, rinds composted into gardens that would return the favour in spring. Communities hosted drop-offs for carved pumpkins to become feed for animals on farms that volunteered to adopt the Orange Army. A holiday earns its welcome when it cleans up its own party. Energy use got smarter. LED strings sipped power. Timers turned lights off at a sensible hour so the sky could have a turn. Shared displays appeared at the ends of cul-de-sacs, so not every house had to buy everything. A street of small choices adds up to a good answer. The future will keep asking questions. Weather is not shy. Some years are warm and ask for costumes without coats. Some years are wet and ask for hallways and community centres. Some years hit pumpkin crops hard and teach us to carve what we can find. The tradition flexes. The bones hold. Fire becomes battery glow. Lantern becomes porch light. Door knock becomes lobby parade. The engine is welcome. It does not rust. Digital nights will grow. Game worlds host costume walks. Virtual porches hand out emotes and badges. It is not the same as a door and a bowl, but it does let a shy kid practice speaking up in a low-stakes crowd and then try it outside next year. Hybrids help people bridge the gap between wanting to join and knowing how. Workplaces found their version, dress themes that respect policy and still find laughter. Desk bowls with allergy notes. A lunchtime parade that loops past the break room and ends at the manager who is dressed as a file folder and is surprisingly good at it. Adults need play. Halloween is a permission slip signed by the entire calendar. Schools refined theirs, daytime parades for safety, book character themes that tie costumes to reading lists. Letters home that explain neighbours, noise, and nutrition with the calm of people who have hosted enthusiasm and survived. Quiet rooms for students who love the idea but need a breather from the volume. Extra candy on hand for anyone who forgot the day and arrived sad. A good school is a great stage manager. Hospitals and care homes wrote their own scripts. Staff dress up in ways that do not start. Wards get gentle decorations. Candy becomes single-wrapped and approved. Music stays soft. Windows host paper pumpkins on strings. Residents tell stories that turn a hallway into a family in under 5 minutes. The season belongs wherever people live. Religious communities adjusted with nuance. Some host harvest festivals with games and pies. Some host trunk or treat events in parking lots so kids can walk a short, safe loop between decorated car trunks. Some hold prayer services and processions and then invite everyone to cider and buns. The point is not to win a debate. The point is to hold a night in which strangers feel less strange. Civic groups joined in. Fire stations left their doors open for tours and treats. Libraries offered story hours by lantern light, with librarians who know exactly when to lower their voice and when to grin. Museums created scavenger hunts that taught facts between chocolate breaks. Parks set up lantern walks with guides who know which paths are smooth and which puddles are ambitious. Neighborhood chats learned a useful cycle. Plan the route, set the hours, share the map, agree on the porch code. Afterward, share photos, share thanks, and share the list of small improvements for next year. The improvements are never dramatic. Move the speaker away from the tiny house, add another ramp, put a bucket by the big step. Ask the teenager with long legs to be a crossing guard. Solve 10 little problems, and you buy 100 big smiles. Global media gave the night a common soundtrack. Songs old and new, playlists that mix cozy with spooky like tea with lemon. A theme park uses an orchestra. A kitchen uses a radio. Both work. Music tells feet how to move and tells shoulders how to relax. Even a looped doorbell chime becomes part of the rhythm and makes the block feel like it is breathing in time. Some countries lean into autumn markets rather than door-to-door, stalls with lanterns, rows of baked goods. A small stage with a storyteller whose voice carries just far enough. Children weave between tables like bees. Adults drink something warm and remember being small. The shape is different. The feeling is right. A quiet truth travels well. The night succeeds when it lifts up the people who might otherwise hide. The shy kid in the cape. The elder on the stoop with a bowl and a chair. The new family reading a map of customs and hoping to get it right. The teen who has had a week and only needs one compliment to reset. A strong Halloween makes room for all of them and pays for it with patience, which is the currency kindness prefers. Globalization can be noisy, but people are good at turning noise into music when they want to. They keep what sings, they ignore what clangs. In Nen City, Halloween means a row of pumpkins and a parade. In another, it means a quiet cemetery and a warm kitchen. In a third, it means both, on different nights, with the same lamp lighting the way across the threshold. The season does have critics. They are not wrong to notice clutter, cost, and the temptation to copy without thinking. The best answer to a fair critique is a better practice. Fewer plastic things, more cardboard art. Fewer noisy props, more neighbours' voices. Fewer borrowed identities, more original wit. Tradition is not a museum exhibit. It is a workshop. Improve it. What stays the same between countries is the human math. Light plus food plus shared time equals less fear. Memory plus humour equals more courage. A child who hears 5 different languages on a street and collects a treat from each learns a lesson no textbook can grade. We are different. We are together. Here is a candy. Walk safe. If you need a final walk before the lights go out, pick any city on the planet that has decided to play. Cross a street marked with chalk pumpkins and arrows. Pass a high-rise lobby where a folding table holds bowls and a sign that says, "Please take kindly." Turn down a lane where candles float in jars like patient stars. Wave at a window where someone dressed their cat as a bat for exactly one camera click, and the cat has decided not to sue. At the end of the lane, a small square glows. People are putting out lanterns in a ring. Someone is telling a story about the year the wind tried to steal every hat in town. Someone is handing out tea. Someone is writing next year on a scrap of paper and pretending it is an official document because pretending is part of the ritual. Children bounce. Elders nod. The air says winter, softly. The lights answer, gently. That is the global shape. Export meet local. Costume meet custom. A travelling knight finds a home in 100 places by agreeing to be a guest and to wash dishes. It leaves behind better maps of each other. It takes with it new jokes to tell in new accents. It proves again the oldest claim. The dark is busy, not empty. People are the busiest part, carrying light the way families carry stories. When you sleep after this tour, keep pet image, a line of small lights crossing a bridge. On one side, October. On the other, November. The lights move steadily. Some flicker, some burn steady, some ride in hands that shake a little from the cold and still refuse to go out. That is the season. That is the future. Keep walking. Keep sharing. Keep the bowl by the door.